Every single decision you make is because you think it's going to increase your happiness and decrease your suffering. Many of those decisions are absolutely stupid, but at the time, you thought it would increase your happiness and decrease your suffering. We are all waves on the infinite sea. We're never separate from the greater reality. Inevitably, that wave is going to go down. So no matter how hard you try to stay at the apex of the wave, you're doomed, because sooner or later, the wave will collapse. What's really holding you back is, what do you think you're going to get to avoid? If you think you're going to postpone it to the future, it's going to be now when it comes. That's where you're trapped.
I'd love to know where the modern world is heading and why that might be the case.
It's wonderfully confused. It's a collapsing civilization, honestly. This is what it looks like when a civilization collapses.
Welcome back to Mulligan Brothers Interviews, and today I have a very exciting episode. We are entering 2026 and so many of you are looking for spiritual guidance. So we head all the way to Palo Alto to sit down with Asha and Nayaswami to talk about how you can start your year 2026 the right way to be aligned spiritually, mentally and emotionally. And just before we get started on the episode, we're so close to 800,000 subscribers. I want to hit 1 million by the end of the year. So please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell if you haven't already, and drop a comment. And also I want to say a massive thank you to our sponsors, Marek Health, who have just signed with us for another 12 months. Thank you to Marek. Go to the link down below where you can get your health optimized. And thank you to everybody who's subscribed to our Patreon and anyone who's watching on Spotify as well. You can get access to the episodes early with both of those links down below. Let's dive into this amazing episode to get our 2026 spiritually aligned with Asha.
The way we usually start is just to introduce yourself and what you do.
Asha Nayaswami. Asha is a spiritual name that was given to me by Swami Kriyananda decades and decades ago. Nayaswami is actually a title. I'm a Swami. I wear blue, however, because about 15 years ago, Swami Kriyananda felt that we needed to shift the focus of the Swami order. The orange represents everything that you burn up and renounce. The blue represents the color of infinite consciousness, and so it represents where we're going. So Asha is a Sanskrit word which means hope, and it's what I've called myself for most of my adult life. And now my title is my last name. As early as I can remember, I've been an avid truth seeker. Even from childhood, I was always just trying to understand more. I was very school smart. I never remember actually learning anything in school at all. I just somehow knew things. I was born into a Jewish family. We were very intellectual. Everybody, we'd all sit at the dinner table and read, everybody reading their own book. I mean, that's how I came up. My older brother was the state debate champion in the state of Texas, which is where I was born, which is a big state. 2 years in a row, he won in high school. So it was a lively household. Let's just put it like that. And I was always being challenged to think clearly, think independently. One of the characteristics of a Jewish family, especially, I was born in 1947, so right after the end of the Second World War, there's always a slight insecurity in Jewish households, especially then, which is that you have to be strong in yourself and you have to make your own way. So I chose that family. I came to understand when I learned reincarnation and about reincarnation and other things, because it was exactly who I am. And they made me into an independent thinker, a little bit of a nonconformist, and also not real interested in entering society as it was. I really had no idea what I was going to ever do, because I just didn't see anything that I wanted to be part of. And then the 60s came. I sort of came of age in the 60s, and by then we were in California, and in Northern California, San Francisco, where the whole scene was just really exploding. And I went for 1 year to Stanford University. University was not for me. But the Grateful Dead, which I know is history now to you people, it was my actual life. The Grateful Dead was forming right then. And so my, quote, college career was every Friday night finding out where they were playing and then just going and just doing what you did when they were playing. But I was looking for a lot more. I had one psychedelic experience. Before I'd ever even had a beer, I'd never done anything to my consciousness. I was given a very heavy dose of LSD, which changed everything for a real simple reason, which is, wow, you change your consciousness, you change everything. But I wasn't attracted to drugs. It was too confusing, and I'm very fond of my brain, and I just didn't want to make a chemical experiment out of my brain. That seemed like a really dumb thing to do. But, wow, you change your consciousness, you change everything. Which led me very shortly after, I was 18, I was given a book by Swami Vivekananda, who was a direct disciple of a great master in India, Ramakrishna Paramhansa, who was a great avatar who lived in the end of the 1800s. And Vivekananda was a very intellectual, extremely brilliant teacher. And I opened his book, and again, I go to reincarnation, which I didn't know at the time, but I was thinking of it. Oh, this is what I've been looking for. This is who I really am. This search for truth that is not wacky, that is really well-grounded, that makes perfect sense, and that is the science of changing your consciousness, which I'd already figured out was what I wanted to do. And for a couple of years, I just read books. And I was living actually not far from where I'm still living. And there was one of the premier bookstores for metaphysical things, East West Books, it's called. And in those days, that was the only way you could get information was books. Because this would have been the late 60s, very late 60s by then. And I started just reading through. I got enough philosophy from Vivekananda, but I wanted to know how you lived it. Because it was kind of driving me crazy, I mean, almost literally, that I knew that there was this whole possible dimension of how I could change myself. But I was still just getting up and going to this dull job that I had and coming home in the evening, hanging out with my friends, getting up the next morning. And the contrast between the potential and the reality was just almost tipping the balance of mental balance for me. So I started just reading about saints and masters and yogis, and I just basically started at one end of that bookshelf and just started reading through it. Let's see, I was Jewish, so I couldn't be a Christian missionary. That was a problem. I was also Jewish, so I couldn't be a nun, nor did I want to be. I was too cowardly to go to India. And I didn't know, I had no idea what to do. But when the disciple is ready, the master comes, basically is what happened to me. Again, at Stanford, which had played a peripheral but interesting role in my life, it's the 60s. All the teachers are coming from India. It's the huge scene in San Francisco, which is just 30 miles from here. And Swami Kriyananda, who has an Indian name but is an American raised in Europe, but nonetheless very American, is a direct disciple of Paramhansa Yogananda, who is the author of Autobiography of a Yogi, which is a seminal textbook that almost anybody who thinks outside the box reads Autobiography of a Yogi. Most people don't give their life to it, but they at least know he's there. He died in 1952. He came to America in 1920 from India, spent his whole teaching life in the West, in California, actually. He died in 1952. Swami Kriyananda was 22 years old, living in New York City. He read Autobiography of a Yogi. He crossed the country. He became Yogananda's disciple. He only had 3.5 years with Yogananda. Yogananda died when Kriyananda was 26, before he was 26. But he carried on. Kriyananda carried on for the rest of his life. 1969, some fraternity over at Stanford thinks, well, wouldn't it be cool to invite a Swami down? It was a party fraternity of all things, where their fraternity house was too small for them. So they had a big party tent outside. So they have this big party tent. They invite this Swami down to give this talk. And my friend told me about it. My friend had already met him. She said, he's a real teacher. I think you'll like him. And that woman is still a dear friend of mine, and truer words were never spoken. He walked into the room. He was dressed in a Swami costume, orange robe, which is what most Swamis wear. But he spoke unaccented English. His life experience was similar to mine. But honestly, he walked into the room, into the tent. And I was with other people who were happy to be there, but only halfway. So we were sitting in the bleachers, as far up the bleachers as we could be. I was up against the tent wall because they wanted to be there, but they wanted to protect themselves from what might happen. He walked into the room. I saw him. Inside of me, this voice said, he has what I want. I mean, I don't know where that voice came from. He has what I want. It was the first time I had seen the personification of everything that I had come to know was true and wanted for myself, but I'd never met anyone who was doing it. I do not know how I knew. He hadn't spoken a word. He just walked in. Now, again, I go to reincarnation. Obviously, I've had many, many, many lifetimes with him because I just knew him and I trusted him completely. And then he spoke. I remember nothing of what he said, except he talked about Yogananda, an autobiography of a yogi, a book which I had but didn't like because it was full of miracles and it was extremely devotional, and I was exceedingly intellectual, and I was a purist, miracles, ta-ta, who wants that, So, but after he talked about the book, and after I met him, I went and read autobiography and loved it. I couldn't figure out why I didn't like it before, but I had to have a living example. But he spoke. I don't remember a word he said, but when he finished, again, I had that unexpected thought, this is the most intelligent man I've ever met, which I knew him closely for the next 45 years, and that perception only increased. I would have followed him if he'd been silent. I would have followed him no matter what, because it was his consciousness that I wanted. But the fact that he was intelligent, I felt was like a bonus, because I like intelligence. It's kind of my hobby, I like articulation. I like subtle ideas. And he was on another dimension to anyone I'd ever met or have ever met. And I just made a decision. I was embroiled in certain other situations, so it took me a little more than a year, because what he also offered was a lifestyle, because Yogananda had proposed that the lifestyle of the future, long-range future, is intentional spiritual communities where people are united by their ideals. And because this is such a materialistic age that we're living in, people of like mind need to band together. Because if you're the only one holding a certain point of view, it's very hard to hold it strongly. If you're in a community of like-minded souls, and I don't mean a closed cult-like community, I just mean having people with whom you have something in common who could be your friends, and you can encourage each other and practice together. So he was starting this community 4 hours from San Francisco, 4 hours from this area, just very much on literally on the ground level, out in the country. So there was a place I could go. I could have an integrated life, which is what I desperately longed for, not to be divided all the time. And there was also a retreat for the public, because the other intensely motivating factor for me was that I really wanted to be helpful to people. I had a very strong desire to serve, but what could I offer people? And even though I was beginning to understand, I could tell that I didn't know. But I didn't want to be isolated, and I didn't want to be closed off. I didn't want to be separated from the world, so to speak. I didn't want to participate in the world, but I didn't want to be in a cave. I wanted to be able to share. So it was perfect. and a little more than a year, it took me that long to untangle. I just went there June 1st, 1971. I walked there, and I have been utterly engaged in the spiritual life through the medium of Ananda, which is the communities that I've been a founding member of 2 of these communities. From the very beginning, I was cooking in the kitchen. I was a terrible cook. I was a food fanatic, which made me interested in food, but I was a horrible cook. And I gradually got better, but I was able to serve. I was able to serve all the time. I cooked 3 meals a day, 6 days a week for about 35 or 40, sometimes more people. And on the 7th day, I drove 20 miles into town and bought the food for the week. I lived in a very, I would call it simple, but primitive is actually the right word. I lived in a tiny trailer, no electricity, no running water, in this place that was 6 miles up a very rutted dirt road. I absolutely loved it. I was happier than I'd ever been in my life. Very early, I formed a very close friendship with Kriyananda. I was Swamiji is what I call him. Swami means teacher. Swamiji means respected teacher. So that's what I always call him. I was there to learn from him. And he responded to my sincerity. And relatively soon I became his secretary, which in modern way of thinking it was more like a personal assistant. And from that day till the day he died in 2013, for the first 16 years, I lived next door. I mean, in sort of the part of the community where many of us lived. I wasn't unique. After 16 years, I've lived in other communities, so I haven't lived next door, but I was in constant contact and association with him. And early on, he had me start telling others what I was learning from him. And so I recognized that I was witness to an extraordinary life. Just an extraordinary person, an instrument of a great master, Yogananda, with an extraordinary mission, and I had a front row seat. And very soon after I met him, within a year or two, I believe, he said to me that he wanted me to write a book about him, write a biography of him. I had a talent for writing, and I had a great fear of writing. So that was both on one hand, that's wonderful, and on the other hand, oh my God. And I basically worried about it every single day until I managed finally to write, which I've now succeeded in doing. But because of that, because he wanted me to write about him, I mean, I already knew, a true teacher, as Swamiji is, because even though he's out of his body, is still as operative. He's still as living as a guide for me as he was when I could call him on the phone. It's inward, but it was always inward. The relationship with a teacher like that is facilitated by outward contact, but it has to be created inwardly. So it was always inward. I always knew what I was dealing with. But I also, because of this tremendous urge to share, I knew I was witness to something important. And from the very beginning, I just knew my job was to pass it on. And so his telling me, responding, what I was saying is, a true teacher responds to who you are. He doesn't impose. He or she does not impose. They recognize, they cultivate, and they refine who you already are. So when he told me he wanted me to write about him, writing was a destiny that I had. Sharing was my nature, and now I really had something to share. So really early, he sent me up to the retreat to be one of the primary ones who met and instructed the guests. The kitchen where I cooked was at the retreat also, so I was always in contact with people, and I was born with this mouth, which was cultivated by my family. And I just passed it on. And it's been, well, from 1969 to the present moment, that is simply what I've done. I have learned from Swami Kriyananda. I've been inspired and to the best of his ability to work with what he had to work with in me. You know, given the raw material, he did a really good job with what he had to work with. I mean, completely transformed. I mean, who I used to be and who I am, it's just, there's no comparison. And my job, basically, is to share with others as generously as he shared with me, and he shared with thousands of others around the planet. And what I learned from him is so deeply integrated into me, I can't really tell the difference, but I'm not making any of it up. It comes from Yogananda through Kriyananda to me. 10 years ago, a little longer than that, about a dozen years ago, just the last year of his life, actually, literally the last half year of his life, he had made me responsible for helping to build a community here in the Silicon Valley where I presently live, where we are. And over 30 years, we built up and made a community. We have a beautiful temple. We have school, kindergarten through high school, small school, which educates children from the beginning in not merely getting good SAT scores, but actually learning how to live. It's called Education for Life. And our particular school is called Living Wisdom. The Ananda version of it is Living Wisdom. We also have a big organic farm and all of those things. And I was fulcrum responsible for it. And then he asked me to turn those responsibilities over to a wonderful woman who was also living here, highly qualified to take it from me. And she's done a wonderful job with it. And he asked me to be Ananda's global ambassador, was the word he used, suggesting I really not live anywhere and that I not be responsible for anything except just moving around. It took me quite a long time to get there. He had to give me that instruction then because he only lived another 6 or 8 months when I needed to hear it directly. I was already, again, he's responding. I was already working that way. I was really starting to work on the internet. I was doing a lot of filming. I was making sure that everything I did was passed out because I could feel that my arena was too small. Not in any sense like I'm more important than that. That wasn't at all like that. It was just more that there's a force of energy that's trying to come through me. And just sitting here and doing this is not really what's expected of me. I had some books to write, which I did, including the book about Swami Kriyananda that had been haunting me for all those years. And after that was done, which was about 6 years ago, I just really started moving around the planet. And mostly on the frontier, so to speak. Everywhere that I go, there's somebody related to what I'm doing who's been hosting and making it happen. I'm not the kind of missionary that just walks into a foreign country and asks God to help you. There's wonderful stories about that, but that's not me. I'm well taken care of. But I travel around and I do the same thing that I've been doing for the last 50 plus years, which is doing my very best to tell anybody who wants to listen what Swamiji told me and to explain why I think it might be helpful to you too, if you're interested. I'm not really proselytizing. I'm absolutely not trying to convert. It's just, these are helpful ideas. And they've transformed my life, and maybe they would help you. And it's right in the center of what the dynamic of our culture is right now, which is excessive materialism, which has led to this strong egoic self-affirmation, balanced by this extreme longing that people feel for something more meaningful. But it's been very difficult for people to find that meaning in the traditional spiritual forms because they're too institutional, they're too dogmatic, and there's too many intermediaries between the individual and the deity, however you think of it. You have to follow all these rules. What Yogananda came to bring, he calls it Kriya Yoga. For anyone who's read Autobiography of a Yogi, he calls it the airplane route to God. It's very deistic. It's very devotional. It freely and frankly embraces a higher reality, the presence of the divine. It's a very interesting blend of East and West. But the fundamental premise is that your spiritual life has to be based on your direct experience. That you can't. My friend who's Indian, one of my many Indian friends, he said Hinduism is one of the only religions where you have to pay someone to practice it for you, in terms of hiring the pujari, hiring the priest to do the ritual. This all had to do with, before he could possibly move into his new apartment, he had to do all these, he had to get the Brahmins to come in, he had to do everything like this, who set a sacred fire in the middle of his living room, so he had to then repaint the apartment, all of this. He had to hire all these priests because it was unthinkable in his culture at that time to do it otherwise. But that's not satisfying for most of us. We want to know for ourselves. So what Yogananda taught was how to meditate. But not meditate just to calm yourself down, but meditate to establish a relationship with the higher dimensions of our own consciousness, which then lead directly into a perception of the infinite, which is one of the words for God. But taking it out of everybody's theology and putting it into our experience of perfect love, perfect joy, perfect kindness, perfect wisdom, all these manifestations of the divine, peace, calmness, the infinite, the music of the spheres, the light. In the beginning was the light. All of these things, but not, the scriptures are all true, but we're not taking it because someone said so. We're doing it because I have been there, and I can go there. And what Kriyananda did with Yogananda's teachings was make it so practical. He wrote 150 books, and it ranges from interpreting the Bhagavad Gita, interpreting the Bible, interpreting Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, to money magnetism, how to attract what you want at the time that you need it, marriage as an expanse for self-expansion, the true nature of creativity and art as a divine message, all of these things, and plus community and living together, and not as monks and nuns only, but as married couples and children, and how to educate children. And it's a big story, and I have never reached the bottom of it. When I started, when I was 24, I'd run through a lot of things faster than I was supposed to, education, relationships. And I just okay, I'm going to start this one. I wonder how long it'll last. Well, here we still are. Because yesterday I learned something I didn't know about myself, about life, about happiness, and today I have too. And so I just keep going, just keep offering it. That's my story.
A quick message from today's sponsor. I want to talk about something that I genuinely use every day, the Waking Up app. If you're disciplined and used to operating under pressure and you still feel like your mind never fully switches off, this is probably for you. For a long time, I thought that being calm just meant staying functional. But what I didn't notice was what was happening underneath. Constant mental noise, tension, and irritation, just running quietly in the background. Waking Up helped me notice that in real time, not after the fact, but by seeing what was actually happening in my mind as it was happening. I used it between meetings, after filming, or when something just didn't go to plan. And when you feel that immediate spike of tension, instead of reacting automatically, you catch it in the moment. And once you see it clearly, it loses its grip. This isn't background music or vague breathing advice. It's real mental training from world-renowned experts. You learn how your attention works, why your mind reacts the way it does, and how to stay clear-headed instead of running on autopilot. If you care about clarity, self-control, and performing well under pressure, not just feeling calm, this app is built exactly for that. You can try the full app completely free for 30 days. No commitment, completely risk-free. Just go to wakingup.com/Mulligan Brothers or use the link in the description exclusively for our viewers to start your free trial right now. That's wakingup.com/Mulligan Brothers or use the link in the description. Thank you to Waking Up for making it free for you guys. Let's get back into the episode.
We spoke about the audience that we have and my own sort of experience at the moment, especially since I would say the last 4 years, that there's been this shift for me, and I think a lot of the people have said the same thing who I speak to, of more investment in the material, more investment in the ego, more investment in the things we feel that maybe we shouldn't do. You know, we have that feeling of maybe we're going in the wrong direction slightly. And I'd love to know if you have a diagnosis of maybe where the modern world has been heading and why that might be the case.
We're shifting from a less aware. Wait, let me start out with that. There's an ancient tradition, an ancient teaching in India, where planet Earth goes through many different levels of awareness. And those levels of awareness are created because our solar system moves closer and farther away from the center of the galaxy. I mean, there's a whole lot more that can be said about that, but let's just say that. If you look at global civilization, if you look at technological development, if you look at any number of things that you would call advancements in the last 150 years, the world that we live in literally did not exist and was not even imagined, 100 years ago. Just everything since 1900 has changed to an extraordinary degree. According to Yogananda's teaching, which is based on ancient Indian teachings, in the year 1900, we shifted from an age where the physical material world was the definition of reality to an age in which we understand that energy is actually the definition of the universe. Einstein says it. Saints and sages have been saying it forever. But now modern physics says it. Everybody says it. This world is not what it seems. And the reason this is happening now is because of these much longer, thousands of years rhythms where the civilizations on this planet rise and fall. Who can explain how they built the pyramids? It's just this weird anomaly that we think 100 slaves dragged those rocks, up those hillsides, but it doesn't make any sense. They had technology that was even more advanced than what we have now, that we can't imagine, but will be normal when it arrives. So what's happening now is the energy of the future is intensifying, and we're all being drawn into a much more unified vision of reality, because energy makes everything the same, whereas matter makes everything separate. But it's a transition age, and transitions are very tricky, because now what we have is this enormous influx of new energy, but we still have a vast population, including many of us, who are still thinking in the old ways. So now I have even more energy, so I think I need even more stuff. And I need bigger and more glorious stuff. So the age we're coming out of is called Kali, which means dark age. Dwapara is the age we're moving into. It simply means second, because it's the second of the ages. But energy and matter. So now we have a materialistic concept of the universe being tremendously energized. So people, instead of becoming freer, are becoming more wildly, extravagantly materialistic, which also leads to a strong self-definition of myself as this physical body, which gives us gender and culture and language and professions and self-identity. And all of that is getting stronger at the same time that this other energy is getting stronger, which is toward unity, toward harmony, toward seeing the oneness of us all, toward having a higher sensitivity to more subtle forms of energy. And the two forces, it's polarizing is what's happening. And even people who are seeking a more subtle understanding are still also get caught up to a certain extent, and we're caught in the middle. You used to be able to kind of hang out in the middle, but now the middle is getting really thin. And you either have to cast your lot in with this new way of thinking, relatively new, or people are defending because they literally know that their lifestyle is at stake, and they're digging in their heels even harder on this side. And that's why we're so divided right now. And it's not going to resolve itself without more turbulence. Yogananda made very strong predictions about how this transition would be completed, which is a lot more violence between this new idea and the old ideas. And it's not that the people who are proposing a different kind of future are participating in this, but it's a cosmic game that's going on, where the more you accelerate all this self-aggrandizement, the more the clash is inevitable. Which is what you see all over the planet right now. It's already breaking out in violent war. Yogananda predicted that we would have more than one, that we would have 2 global conflicts, that there would be serious economic collapse, depression that would also become global, that there would be earth cataclysms. And he's not the only one who said it. When he said it in 1950, it wasn't so common. But nowadays, if you're just looking at what's going on, you see it all around you, because the future is going to be different than the past. But many people have incarnated to be part of the turbulent transition. So it's a very insecure time that we're living in, but a positive one.
The idea that the world is heading towards more turbulence, or is it within that turbulence? I think everybody feels that. I think, especially right now. But when you say, like, I get a sense that when you're talking, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Is that the case? Or
okay, I could say, well, saints and prophets, Mother Mary at Fatima, Mother Mary at Medjugorje, Padre Pio in Italy, Paramahansa Yogananda from India, many other swamis and spiritual leaders from India are saying it. But you don't have to be a prophet these days to see. You just listen to the posturing of the national leaders all over the world. You listen to the increasing hatred and divisiveness that is being built in. You listen to the music, which is celebrating violence, both in its rhythms and its lack of melody and in its lyrics. You see the incredible confusion in households and in raising children, in education, between men and women. It doesn't, unfortunately, all that momentum is not going to just go away. It's just creating this turbulent force, which is going to have to expend itself. And the earth itself is being grossly mistreated. And it takes Mother Nature a while to get really upset. But when she gets upset, it's pretty hard to stop her. So we have that going on also. However, all of it is for a positive purpose. So even though I've just given this horrible picture, I'm actually quite cheerful and optimistic, weird as that may sound, because the entire purpose, and I'll speak again from Yogananda's point of view, people have lost their way. We've just lost contact with our own higher nature. And we've lost the wisdom to know what really brings happiness and what really causes suffering. And we're so lost that we're fighting for it instead of gardening and blooming it like this. But the purpose is to bring us back, to awaken people to the spiritual dimension of life, and to awaken people to a new understanding of the spiritual dimension, which is that God is within. And this is what Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven seek ye first the kingdom of God. And where is the kingdom of God? And then he says, you don't find it by saying lo here and lo there, as if you're looking under the table or across the street. The kingdom of God is within you. I mean, it's because all saints and masters say the same thing. What Yogananda brought for a new age was a new understanding, which is the art of meditation, the art of changing our consciousness by conscious practices to bring us back to a balanced understanding of our relationship to a greater reality. But because of the karma of lots of different things, we're given two choices right now. I mean, two primary choices, which is we fight hard to seek our final satisfaction by enough material experience that it will finally give us what we want, or the response to the realization that that is not working so well. The question always, when somebody presents a strong point of view in what they're doing, you say, and how's that working for you? It's not working so good. So at the same time, there's this enormous influx of completely new way of understanding life, understanding God, understanding where happiness comes from. And it's growing like a mushroom all over the planet because this is the future. But if we respond to that higher call willingly and actively, we won't have to be bashed over the head in order to wake up. And so the job of many of us is to wake up without having to go through the extreme learning experience of very hard times. Very hard times, unfortunately, are sent to teach us things. So there's two groups of people who've incarnated on this planet by choice. Some of them are the ones who really want one last try at the super materialistic way, self-aggrandizing, even violent way of doing things to see if it's going to make them happy. Reincarnation has to be part of this story. I believe this is how to become happy. Now, if you examine your own life and think about it, we never learn from being told. If we learn from being told, it's because we already just learned it and somebody put it into words for us. We learn 100% from our own experience. That's why we have so many incarnations, because we have free will, God-given free will, to experiment until we learn. And then we change because we learn. If you think about your own life, I think about mine. It's like at different points I learn things, almost always because I suffered. And because I suffered, I had to go much more deeply into my reality, and then I asked different questions, and then I learned something I didn't know. And that we repeat that process over and over. So a transition between Kali and Dwapara Yuga, between the age of matter and energy, is a super good opportunity for people who like to destroy things. And they like to destroy things with armies, and they like to destroy things with nuclear weapons, and they like to just go into excessive materialism and hedonism and, the pleasure of violence as much as they can. So that whole group gets to come right now. And this is, if you look at predictions from all kinds of places, one prediction, a German saint from 300 years ago, her actual words were, a lot of demons will be let out of hell right at this period of time, which is not the way I would phrase it at all. But it's interesting that she said it, which is a lot of souls who need to have these experiences to learn. And then there's us, the people who are awakening to the light without having to be creamed by a bomb in order to do it, who are laying the foundation of a new reality, and I will add, speaking for myself, who are frightened to death of these people. So I get to face my fear. I get to do good work, do good by sharing new ideas, but I also get to be in a very turbulent, uncertain time. And so I get to grow also, because it frightens me, all of this. And what frightens me most of all is the suffering of others.
Is it a case of that one of these sides will win, or do we? Because I guess some of it individually, we're talking about a process we can go on and we can wake up and we can become aware. But then the idea of it being a cycle, do we just, is there also the idea of just allowing it to be played out?
Well, you see, now we have to talk about we have to talk about what the real plot is. It's not that planet Earth ever becomes perfect, or any planet, inhabited planets. Yogananda said there are countless inhabited planets. And when we're in the astral world, which is the energy universe between our material incarnations, and we know we have certain karma that we're going to have to work out. It's the energy pattern in the chakras. When you're in your energy, in the energy body, you're in the energy pattern. You have karma that can only be worked out in a material body. It comes time for you to come back into a material body. You survey creation, essentially, and you find the place that will allow you to learn whatever the next lesson is. Karma is an unlearned lesson. Karma is something I don't yet know about the nature of reality, my relationship to the divine, what brings happiness and what brings suffering. So I was born into an intellectual Jewish family, which helped set me up. I was born at a certain time so that I could meet my teacher, Swami Kriyananda, when I was young. All of these things are all in place because I had certain lessons to learn in this incarnation. So, but the drama of creation is individual. The drama of creation is we are an individual spark of divinity. The Sanskrit word for it is jiva. The English word is soul, which is not quite as accurate as jiva. Jiva means that's that spark of divinity that is uniquely mine and has always been me through all these incarnations, no matter what body I wore, no matter what culture I was in. I've always been me in the same weird way that I've always been me in this incarnation. I've always been me in all my incarnations. But the who I was when I was a 3-year-old girl is quite different than who I am now, but it's still me. So reincarnation works a lot like that, but with more wild variations in a much longer time span. But the drama of creation is for each individual jiva to become fully realized, which we use the phrase self-realized. Self-realization is how Yogananda phrased it, to realize, bear in mind, not acquire, but realize what has always been true, which is, who am I? There's entire spiritual paths that are simply, who am I? You ask that question over and over. And when you finally answer it, then for you, the drama is done. You can choose to come back and help others on this planet or wherever we want to be, but I have no karma left. I've learned everything that I need to know. The planet that we live on, and whether it's rising in consciousness or falling, or subject to wars or chaotic, is the backdrop. It is not the project. It's just the backdrop. You go into a great opera house, fantastic sets, but it's not the set that is the show. The show is the actors and the singers in front of it. And that's the drama. The backdrop just adds to it and gives them something to work with. That's what's going on this planet. Planet will never be perfected. It's a university. It's a school where we spend some time and then we go on. And according to the cycle, because it's a question of these cosmic forces, this planet is sometimes enlightened and sometimes not enlightened. And it's a 24,000-year cycle. The nadir of it was 500 years after the life of Christ, 500 AD, which meant that Jesus and all his disciples, who were fully enlightened, Jesus himself had no karma. He came only to help us. He was a God-realized master like Krishna, like Buddha. But he came in the worst possible time. Crucifixion was how they basically did away with anyone they didn't like. And they didn't even crucify them. At least now when we execute people, we do it in secret. They crucified you right along the streets. So, you're just going to the market and people are being crucified on the streets. It was a horrible age, crude and awful in countless ways. But he was completely free. It was just the right environment. And he obviously planted very deep seeds of enlightenment that helped get us through, and going up the other side. And then we reach the apex, and then we come back down again. So the earth never gets perfect. We just are born here with this weird idea that it's going to be perfect. I'm like, who said so? How did that idea ever come to me? We know that perfection is possible, but if we're trying to make the world perfect, it just changes the only certainty. But when we realize it, we grow from this. We go through stages, and the first stage is, or the second stage actually. The first stage is who cares? I just, drink and drug and don't pay any attention, or I'm just too primitive in my thinking. Second stage is I'll make the world right. I'll get control. I'll get the car. I'll get the house. I'll get the man or the woman, and I'll get it all, and I'm going to fix it, and it's going to stay there. Or I'm going to fix the whole world, and it's going to stay there. And it doesn't, because it's not meant to. It's ephemeral. And at the very least, eventually you die. And then it's all gone, and you have to start again. So after we do that for a lot of incarnations, which is what a lot of these folks are doing now, for a lot of incarnations, it finally begins to dawn on us that this is not working. And it occurs to me, I could have mastery here, but I have to master my own reactions. I have to master my own energy. I have to my own response. I have to overcome my own fears. I have to open my own heart. That's something I can really control. And a great deal of this grasping outwardly is for mastery, but they're trying to master a handful of mercury. It can't be mastered. But when we begin to work on consciousness, you see, that was my experience. And I was one of the generation that learned it first through psychedelics. And that's one of the reasons that the psychedelics just blew apart. Because, oh my gosh, it's not outside of me, it's inside of me. And then and this is ancient philosophy. It's all written out. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you, meaning everything else that you seek. Not necessarily the car and the house and the this, but everything that you really seek. Because once you have inward consciousness. And so all of these difficulties coming to the planet are to help those souls who don't know to recognize the folly of all of that, except, once you die, it's just gone. It doesn't matter. You're still there, but it's gone. And those of us who are already awakened will not have to be set on fire because we're already waking up. But as I said, we have other karma. I know for myself, my karma is the fear of other people suffering. And how can I remain connected to my inner reality when so much would be pulling me into states of fear and despair that I don't want to go to? Because the masters, and to be able to do that without closing your heart. You see, it's very easy just to go like that, but that's not freedom. You're still afraid. And true love casts out all fear, also from the Bible, St. John.
I think so many people who are probably watching this, and this is one of the reasons we really wanted to have this conversation, or I wanted to have this conversation, is they are grasping the physical constantly. They're trying to build wealth, power. I mean, we spoke about power as a big one, and I like the way you put it, to change the world around them, or change the world to make themselves comfortable. That is a really good way of explaining it for how I feel. I think sometimes of, if I can just do this, then I'll feel better. A quote came to my head of everybody. I think it's something like, everybody knows that money doesn't bring you happiness, but we want to find out for ourselves.
Well, that's a very valid proverb. You have to find out for yourself.
And I think at the moment, it's like, without the carryover, if you believe in reincarnation, which I want to get into in a conversation, without the carryover of consciousness from reincarnation, is if we don't know what has happened in past lives, or if we don't understand that we've already had a history of trying to get physical possessions and it didn't bring us anything, how do we know? Is it just it's going to take a certain amount of lifetimes to figure that out?
Well, you're also using the pronoun I, which of course everyone does, but the question is, who am I? Meaning, is what my conscious mind presently can remember and understand, do I have any other dimensions that are also I? Because you have a conscious mind, but you also have a superconscious.
Okay, let's dive into the superconscious.
Well, but the point being, we on a deeper level, we know many things that the limited conscious mind does not have easy access to unless you begin to train yourself to be able to do that. And so just as people train their bodies to be able to do extraordinary things, you can also train your consciousness and your mind to be able to do extraordinary things. I mean, that's what the real art of meditation is to open the gateway between the conscious and the superconscious.
When you say train the mind or the consciousness, is it the same way we can train the body in terms of, like, for me, the reason I love training the body is because the more I put into it, the more I can receive from it. Like it has this quite almost like aggressive sort of energy. Like I can really push into it, and like the more I give, the better I get. The circumstances are afterwards. Is that the same kind of way that we can work on the mind, or is it different?
The quality of the energy you have to apply is entirely different. The theoretically they match, and it's those desires and those impulses to push the limits of who we are, whatever the who is and the I am at that time, is a God-given, superconsciously inspired direction, because what you're trying to develop is self-mastery, and the discipline required, the focus required, the appreciation of effort brings consequences, and if I want something, I work for it, and the ability to draw energy from the universe and then focus it on something. These are fundamental life skills that we have to develop, and we only do something because we want to, and we only do it because we think it's going to give us something that we want. So if I say sit silently over in the corner and all that you seek will come to you, if you don't believe me, you're not going to be able to sit there for a minute, and you're not going to gain anything just being tied into that corner and meant to stay there, because there's no inspiration for you to really develop your skills. So we are guided by our superconscious to want things, and then in the process of wanting them enough, we begin to develop fundamental skills of self-realization, actually. It's just the concept of self keeps expanding. So often, the worst criminal becomes a saint faster because the worst criminal may have really developed concentration, energy, determination, faith, magnetism. They've just been pursuing an unfortunate goal. But once they understand that the goal is wrong, they know how to do it. And so oftentimes a person may appear to be very nice and very spiritual and always smiling and very sweet, but they really just, as Swami Kriyananda said, they just don't have the energy to sin. It's not that they don't want to. They don't even have the energy to want to sin. And if they did, they wouldn't know what to do. They wouldn't know how to get to it. But the criminal or the bodybuilder may really know how to use energy, and then he just changes his goal. So it's directional. It's not this is good, that is bad. It's how you're developing yourself. The drama is me, not the things I'm doing. The things are a means to an end.
Just a quick message from today's sponsor. After putting my body through extreme physical and mental stress over the last few years, I realized something important. Most people don't have a health problem, they have a clarity problem. They know something feels off, but they don't have real data or real guidance. That's what Marek Health helped me with. This isn't generic healthcare. You don't get brushed off, you don't get handed vague advice, or have to wait months just to have a real conversation. You get comprehensive lab work, a dedicated health coach who actually checks in, and licensed medical providers who help you understand what's happening in your body and what your options are moving forward. Whether you're dealing with low energy, sleep issue, hormone imbalance, or you just want to perform at your very best, Marek gives you the tools and the team to make the progress. No guessing, no one-size-fits-all protocol. This is real health optimization service. And this isn't just for athletes. If you're someone who takes performance seriously, physically or mentally, this is about making informed decisions instead of hoping things sort themselves out. If you're serious about your health, the first step is simple. Get your blood work done. Head to the link in the description and use code Mulligan for an exclusive offer on your initial assessment. Stop guessing and start taking ownership of your health. Go to the link in the description for your exclusive discount and make sure you use code Mulligan. Thank you, Marek Health, and let's get back into the episode.
I think people who have, I'll talk from my own perspective. When I want to achieve something or I want to better myself, if I'm given a direction to go in, I almost like latch onto it. Like as you're speaking right now, okay, work on yourself, which is great advice. But I'm almost like, okay, that's a really strong and powerful for me. I need to invest in working on myself. Is that because it's a goal and it's something I need to be doing, or is there something more to the idea of working on yourself? And I know we're talking from the perspective of, yes, of course, that's the truth. We really need to look inward. But a large portion of the viewers of this show, we have hundreds of thousands of different messages coming our way every single day. And I don't know if it's because it's true and it's something that I need to do, or if it is just another thing, that I'd be chasing because I think for a lot of people, because some influencer told us to do it online, or
Exactly.
Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. I mean, nowadays, it's just you're overwhelmed. Okay, so you have to be authentically yourself, and directional is the word that we want. You want to be moving in what is, and it's between what is expansive for you and what is contractive for you. What makes you bigger, and what requires more energy, what requires more concentration, what requires more discipline, more, and to get better, more kindness, makes you a more loving person. Where does happiness, what causes happiness, what causes suffering? We never do anything. If you really look at your life, every single decision you make is because you think it's going to increase your happiness and decrease your suffering. Many of those decisions are absolutely stupid in retrospect. But at the time, you thought it would increase your happiness and decrease your suffering. And the phrase I always say to myself is, well, it seemed like a good idea at the time. And it may have been the right thing to do because it was so wrong that you will actually learn something. And by wrong, all I mean is it will not bring you happiness. It will increase your suffering. And that's the template. And so but then you begin to, a person who trains hard physically, because that's what we're talking about, a person who trains hard physically is not necessarily pleasurable or easy. Often it's painful and takes away from other things, and you really have to work hard at it. But you're not looking for pleasurable and easy. You're looking for what really causes happiness and what really causes suffering. So as you have these experiences, your idea of happiness gets more and more subtle, and your idea of what causes suffering gets more and more subtle. And so that you can train like a crazy person and actually enjoy it because you know it's going to bring you what you ultimately want. And that's what awakens in us after a time. And as I was saying, it does not awaken because somebody said so. It awakens because it resonates with you. And so the job that we're faced with now is to be more sensitive to our own reality and to develop faith in our own experience. This is the question: how do you get good judgment from experience? And then how does that? Well, you exercise bad judgment, and then you find out what worked and what didn't. So the main thing is you have to pay attention to what's happening, and you have to be honest about what's happening, and not just filled with bravado, putting on a show, or afraid to deal with your feelings, with your fears, step by step. But whatever builds your courage and your strength will eventually help you to overcome everything, which is why if you want to be a bodybuilder this whole incarnation, just do it well. Because when you're finished, you'll know how much happiness it brought you and how much suffering it caused you. And then, if not in this lifetime, in the next incarnation, when you have the chance to do it again, your soul will remember, your higher self will remember. A friend of mine was a cellist, and he was a cellist teacher. And he said, I think 2 or 3 times in his life, real prodigies came to him, real musical prodigies. And he said, interestingly, I think he said 2 or 3 times, at the age of 10, the child quit playing music because there was nothing more they could learn from it. They had already taken music as far as it would go. And nobody, and from one side it looked like a tremendous waste, but from the point of view of the child, it's like, been here, been there, done that. Nothing in it for me. So, but in order to be able to tell the difference, you have to have the courage and the honesty to really ask him, what am I doing? Am I just doing this because it's familiar and secure? Or am I really expanding in doing this? And sometimes people are super physical, because if they're not super physical, they would have to deal with their feelings. So what is expansive? To just keep being super physical because now I don't ever have to face my feelings? Or someone just does nothing but just wallow around in their feelings and, hey, just get to work, buddy. Enough already. It depends. It's not like a straight line, like we're all lined up like in a marathon and we just run out like this. It's if you think of it more, it's like the rim of a wheel. We're all arrayed around the rim of the wheel, doing what we're doing. I'm a fanatic. I'm a lazy bum. I'm a thief. I'm pretending to be saintly. Whatever. We're just arrayed out there. The balance, the point we're trying to reach is the center, which you might say is the inner self, or the spiritual eye. I mean, there's all different ways to say it, but we're becoming bigger, oddly enough, because the more you go to the center, the wider your view of the wheel is, until when you're finally in the center, you can access the whole thing. But if you're timid, you need to, show a little spunk and get mad sometimes. So you have to head north, let's say. If you're nothing but an angry man, you have to calm down, so you have to go south. And so north and south meet each other, and they argue about who should go where, which is the, quote, right direction. But it depends on where you are. And so you often have to start with the body. When I first started on spiritual things, the first thing I did was change my diet and become a food fanatic, because I couldn't access my poor little brain, and I didn't know what to do with my heart, but I could deal with my lunch, So, in fact, the mere fact that I hadn't had sugar in 4 or 5 years did not make me a saint. But it was a good start.
Where should we start on a diet? Like, what's a few changes we can make?
I mean, at this point, after having been a food fanatic for years, my basic idea about diet is as close to the way God made it as possible. The more man has monkeyed with it, the less likely it is going to be helpful to you. I myself am not. I'm not quite a vegan, but I'm almost a vegan. And I've been a vegetarian since I was 18 because I didn't want to eat dead animals. It just seemed like an awful idea to me. I'll go into a restaurant and people will, at the next table, will be, ordering steaks and lobsters and chickens and things like that. And I mean, I know it's unreasonable, but I'll think maybe in the privacy of their own home, but out here in public, because I'm just so, but nobody made me do it. In fact, my family thought I was going to die of malnutrition. But I was happier. It was very simple. I thought it would increase my happiness and decrease my suffering. I was also extremely interested in health, even though I was very healthy. But I realized only later, I've been sick in many lifetimes. I've abused my body in many lifetimes. So as soon as I was able to be in control of my own life, I became extremely health conscious, and I've remained so up until now. And so I thought, I'm naturally healthy. No, you used to be sick. And I found out, the question of, I don't remember the past life, but I remember that I've learned something, and I understand that I must have learned it through experience. And you can just start thinking like this. When I first heard about reincarnation, to go there for a minute, when I first learned about reincarnation, I'd never heard of it before, although I've since learned it is part of the Jewish faith, depending on where you look. And it was also part of Judaism when Jesus was there. Most of the references to reincarnation were taken out of the Bible around 500 something, but there's a few of them are still in there. Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do you say I am?" And they name all the old prophets. What are they talking about? Of course, they're talking about reincarnation. How can you be the Messiah? Because Elijah has to come first. Elijah has come, but they didn't recognize him, Jesus says. And they knew he was talking about John the Baptist. So who could John the Baptist be but the reincarnation of Elijah? But that's over here. When I heard about reincarnation, I had no context for it, but it came in the context of other things that I could understand. So I started simply applying it as a possible explanation for the things that happened to me and the things that I observed. And I just started seeing if it made sense. And just using the example, my extreme interest in being healthy to the point of, wincing at unhealthy habits, I realized, well, of course, I learned that. Because how do you learn? You abuse your body, you get very sick or die at a young age, or you go through some miserable disease, and then you think, gee, I don't think I want to do this again. And you learn. So I apparently learned that one because I just moved right into it. It took zero discipline, for me to eat in a super healthy way. But it's a very good laboratory that you're carrying around. Let's experiment. What happens if? Does it make me happier? Does it increase my happiness? Does it decrease my suffering? And it's so right in front of us, and we have to eat every day, and I'm inside my body, so I can tell. And so if it's a super good place to start. It requires discipline. It often requires to go on alone when everybody else around you is drinking and eating dead animals. You may have to decide not to. All of these things. So it's a super good place to start. And it will often lead, because then it begins to change your inner awareness. Wrong kind of eating clouds your mind and makes you heavy not in a physical sense, but heavy in your consciousness. So you start making those kinds of changes, and then you start having experiences that you don't have until you make those changes. So everything is directional.
When people are more susceptible to these ideas, is that like I'm envisioning the idea of veganism or vegetarianism or vegetarians or whatever. When there's activists and they go out there into the public and they speak to some people, is that they will not get anywhere. They're arguing with a brick wall. The people that they're talking to might not have the awareness, or might not just. It's almost like they just don't want to hear the message. Is that a point of where that person is in their like their reincarnation, is that is it because they're not aware and they're just going through life at the moment where they're choosing not to have awareness or a level of consciousness? Like what's the, and then there's some people who are almost born with that awareness, and you can show them one picture and they would understand that, okay, eating meat's bad and that's it. I don't want to do that anymore.
Think of it like this. Now, we have to start from the premise that it's an energy universe, and that even though we look like physical beings, we're actually just a pattern of energy. This is the story of the chakras, which is a whole other story. These are the chakras are the energy blueprint of everything that happens to us. And the chakras are the energy body, and they are the means by which memory, experience, and awakening is carried from one incarnation to the next. Just as I'm dressed in this costume now, later tonight I'll go up into my room and I'll take this dress off and I'll put on my pajamas, but I'll still be me, even though I'll look different. And I could dye my hair and change it and put on makeup and look like this, and I'll appear to be entirely different, but I'm still me inside of it, because there's another reality that is the actual me. So from incarnation to incarnation, we put on these bodies, and we wear them so long that we think that that's who we are. And all the death and return experiences, people are coming back and telling us, no, you take off your body and you're still there just exactly as you are. So we're vibrating at a certain whatever, however you would call it. If you think of a piano keyboard, each of those notes has a measurable vibration. The piano tuner can tune each note to that measurable vibration. We, in our consciousness, have a measurable vibration. It's a conglomerate. It's not one tone. Between what you would say is absolute ignorant delusion about the nature of reality and what causes happiness, and Christ-like, to be a God, a Buddha, to be a God-realized master, like that. And over the course of our many incarnations, we gradually keep refining our vibration more and more, and until eventually we become infinite in our understanding. We're limited in our understanding of truth and reality, and then we become infinite. But at any point, we're sort of depending on different areas. We have more understanding here and less over here. Somebody could be extremely successful at the work that they do, just masterful, but a complete bomb in terms of their interpersonal relationships. So they vibrate high in manifestation, they vibrate lower in opening your heart and sympathetic relationship to others. So because energy has magnetism, we attract to ourselves those things that will be useful to us as we go through this process. So if we are ready to learn about veganism, when somebody says it to us, we will respond because it matches us. We will be put in that point where we'll hear it. Or, alternatively, it will be offered to us and we'll harden ourselves even more against it. So both things happen, which is why you can't really persuade someone. You can magnetize them to an idea, which is that you can present it with so much energy behind it that those who are in tune with it will be drawn into it. But they will not be drawn into your experience of it. They will be drawn because of their own experience to it. And that's why you can't make this world perfect, because this particular planet at this particular time is very heterogeneous, which is to say there are people of wildly different vibrations inhabiting this planet at the same time, which is especially polarized. So what makes perfect sense to one seems like absolute bilge to someone else. But when you're ready to hear it, Swami Kriyananda walked in that room. And in fact, that was a very unsuccessful program for various reasons, because the atmosphere was so chaotic that particular night, because it was the fraternity. And it actually literally devolved into chaos. At some point, somebody's playing jazz piano, some people's doing other things like this. And far from Swami Kriyananda recognizing and saying, "Oh, my child, you have arrived," anything like that, like 20 years later, I reminded him that that's where I first met him. His response was, "You were there?" He said, "That was one of the worst nights of my life." He said, "But at least something good came out of it." So there were a lot of people in that room, and they didn't take from him what I took from him. But my vibration and his vibration was just what I was looking for. I was ready for it, just like that. But it didn't happen to everyone else because they were vibrating differently. Now, in the Bhagavad Gita, and the Bhagavad Gita is essentially the equivalent of the Bible for the whole Indian world, the world of India, because they have reincarnation and God-realized masters and directional development. It's all intact. They have verses where they talk about how do you ever learn these higher teachings. And they just talk about it like this. I'm paraphrasing. At first, you never hear about it because you just never hear about it. Then people around you talk about it, but you don't understand a word they're saying. And then you get to the point where you slightly understand, but you immediately fall asleep because it just doesn't match you. Then you understand, but forget. You understand while they're telling you, but then you forget. And then the next stage is you remember a little, and then you remember more. But how many incarnations does that represent? How many lifetimes of trying out everything else does that represent? It's marvelous, actually. It's also incredibly encouraging. Reincarnation for me has been so much fun because, well, if I don't get it right this time, I get another chance. You know, it's the ultimate, in my case, it relaxes me. I'll do the best I can, but there's no such thing as failure. I'll just get another chance.
When I think of reincarnation or living beyond this physical body, I think my head has always gone to like the science and gone, okay, well, I have these atoms in my body, I will be buried, I will be burned, whatever it is, and they will be released into the earth, and eventually a tree will sprout, or, you know, and that's how I've seen it that way. I thought, okay, I can somehow see how that happens. If that's not the case, if it's not the physical manifestation, if our physical body does go into the earth and becomes plants and trees or whatever, the other side of it, you're saying the chakras are the
chakras.
Where do they go in the interim? Like where do they go? Yeah, how'd they arrive at another body?
Well, you're going to go above my pay grade here, but I can give you some stories that I believe to be true. You know, my understanding is study, association with Swami Kriyananda, a lot of intuition, a certain amount of experience. But I put it all together. You can go above my pay grade pretty easily, but I know what that country looks like. So, and again, this is the classic Indian teaching. If you think about how things are made, even on this planet, everything starts with an idea. You put energy into that idea, and eventually something is manifested. We're sitting in a building. I happen to know when this was built, and I watched it be built, and I know who built it, literally, who physically built it, as well as the person who wanted it built. She thought of building a house. She went and got an architect. They made plans. She hired a lot of my friends, and they put a lot of energy into making it, and lo and behold, there's a house like that. It would never have happened if there hadn't been an idea. And lots of people have lots of ideas, but never put any energy into those ideas, and so they never manifest. So and what we're doing is we're following a higher pattern of creation. We have three basic levels of our being. The causal plane, which is the realm of ideas, the astral plane, which is the realm of energy, and then the material plane, where we live now. Until we become more refined in our vibration, let me put it differently. All three of those dimensions exist simultaneously in this room at this time. If Yogananda walked into this room, he would see the material, the astral, and the causal. He could experience all of those because his vibration extended from the extreme subtlety of the causal world all the way down to the manifested world. My vibration is pretty much in the material world. I squeeze up into the astral world in a intuitive sense. I can't experience it. I can't go there. And, every so often I enter the realm of ideas. So the physical body that we wear if this dress is taken off and burned to ashes and buried in the ground, I still exist. And we have to just get into the relationship that we inhabit the body. And the only reason we are inhabiting it is because our energy self is in the middle of it. I've been with people who've died. I mean, I've been there when they breathed their last. I sat in this deathbed scene with a very dear friend of mine, a very highly advanced individual. For 3 days, we watched her body and we talked to her and we were completely focused on her body. Then she went unconscious and we listened to her breathe. And we just listened to her breathe, but we were still completely focused on her. Then birth and death is so beautiful. When the baby is born, it either breathes or it doesn't breathe. You know, and if it doesn't breathe, the body is perfect, but nobody is there. But it also ends with an exhalation. So when somebody dies, you hear them exhale, and then you wait, but they never breathe in again. I mean, it's extraordinary, okay? What was so fascinating to me, as soon as she exhaled for the last time, her body became a piece of furniture. We had been so focused on her body, but when she left, it just became like a discarded nightgown because it just wasn't her. And you could still feel her in the room. She was still in the room, but she wasn't inside that body anymore. That's what all the death and return people tell us. The dimension is right there, but we're not vibrating subtly enough to be able to know that it's there, like that. So death is super scary to everyone because we think that without this physical body, I can't be conscious. And that's what's so startling to people who leave their bodies. It just startles them because I don't have a brain, I don't have a body, but I'm still me because all I ever was that energy pattern. Does that communicate?
It does, yeah. I think the issue that people have is conceptualizing it, of not having a thought of that, not having a memory of that, not being able to connect
Not
the
having
dots.
a memory that you can access of that. That's it. See, there's a great difference. Mm-hmm. This is, again, we limit ourselves to what we're identified with now. But many people do have memories of that, especially children. But they're those ideas are sort of become less popular. We lose contact. When children are small, they often remember their past lives. You know, Mommy, I remember, well, this little boy, his father was getting upset with him because he kept spilling the milk. His father sort of yelled at him because he spilled the milk. And he said to his father, when I was the daddy and you were the little boy, I never yelled at you. I mean, how many times do children say things like that?
Is there other examples of memories that we can't access?
Absolutely. I went to Greece. I went up to the whatever, Acropolis. Is that what you call it in Greece? If I got the right,
Not too sure.
Whatever it is, it's a hillside in Athens. Well, I mean, I'd never been there before, but I was just like, they had to basically drag me down from that hill because I did not want to leave. I was so happy there, and it was just like, I mean, it's a nice place, but my relationship to it was totally out of proportion, except when I started applying reincarnation as a possible explanation. Well, this was a home to me, and I was very happy here. What is love at first sight? It's not first sight. It's just as simple as that. It's not first sight. It's, oh, there you are again. And how many people in your life, and also your enemies, oh God, there you are again. You know, just like, I mean, and sometimes Yogananda said families, enemies incarnate in the same family to, quote, fight it out at close quarters. I mean, I knew a woman, poor woman, she had twins, a boy and a girl. She adored the boy. She couldn't stand the girl. And because the girl, the relationship was antagonistic just from the start. And it was more exaggerated because they were twins. I mean, she she gradually overcame it, but it was terrifying to her. But of course, if you'd been fighting over the same man in the previous incarnation, or if the daughter had murdered the mother in another life, or, God knows all the things that happen. What do you think that happens to all that energy? Do you think when all those things happen, if they don't resolve in one lifetime, well, poof, that's the end of it? I mean, even science tells you that energy does not go away, and it's stored in your chakras. And the vibration, it's a vibration. And then it attaches itself either specifically to the person you were involved with or to the situation that matches what the vibration is. I know all this sounds a little bit complicated, but it isn't really. It's real once you sort of begin to get the feeling of it, assuming I've lived before, this life is just a chapter in a very long book. You know how when you read a chapter book, it often ends as a cliffhanger, and you don't know where it's going to go. Then you turn the page and the whole story is completely different, and it's a while before you get back to it. That's our lifetimes. And death just ends the chapter. But it doesn't end the story, because the story's not finished until we've learned everything there is to learn.
So is there are we on a path to, like, are we supposed to be following, I think the word comes up for me is purpose, like we talk about finding our purpose. And when I say to people like about finding a purpose, because I feel like I found mine, it's like trying to explain to people to find something that resonates with them and feels right. And I've felt that as I've moved towards things that felt right, I started to feel happier and I started to feel more content. But do we have a purpose? Is that a thing?
Everybody has the same purpose, which is a gradual expansion of our self-definition until we become infinite, a greater and greater capacity for perfect love and perfect joy. That is our real purpose. That's the underlying purpose behind everything. So when people say, I need to find my purpose, they're often thinking my profession, my reason to get up in the morning, whatever that might be. The reason that purpose resonates with you is because it's expansive for you. It's making you bigger than you were in some way or another. You're learning to put out more energy because you want to. And so we think that we'll be happy if we can just be as small as possible and not be troubled. Not be bothered by things. Nobody's paying any attention to me. I get to just do what I want. But what really gives us perfect joy is when we keep expanding. This is just one of the things you discover about what makes me happy. If you do a crummy job, you really don't feel as good as you do when you pursue excellence, because it's the way we're made. But it takes less energy to do a crummy job. And if you're at the point of development where you think this is the first stage, the less energy I put out, the better I am. So I'll just drink and eat poorly and take drugs and just be as close to unconscious as I can be all the time. But after a while, that just gets boring. And you find out if I put out a little energy toward the things I want, then I actually feel better. So then we start pursuing desires. And then we gradually refine. But if the desires that I pursue expand, lead to greater self-mastery, I find that self-mastery brings happiness. And so in that level, if you can do something that inspires you that you're inspired to do, where you can make the energy flow, that is your karmic purpose in this moment, not because of the thing you're doing, because it activates in you the ability to put out energy and to concentrate. And it makes you inherently a bigger and better person, right? Yeah. So when people say, what is my purpose? If they're too external about it, sometimes it's difficult to solve. But how can I make into a beneficial purpose whatever it is that I have to do? Mm. And then if you do that, one of the primary laws of abundance is that you have to accept and use what's given to you. So if you just sit there and wait for your purpose to arrive, and then you're finally going to put out energy, you're squandering whatever opportunities are in front of you to love, to serve, to grow, to learn how to achieve excellence. So if you don't know what you're supposed to do in an external sense, but you make the very best of what's in front of you, it will change your magnetism, and then you'll attract what you need to do. And your description of yourself includes introspection, the courage to try, the energy to do it, and the honesty to pay attention to the results. And when you sort of get those things going, you can see that that's a toolbox. The courage, the energy to try, to observe your experiences, introspection, and then the honesty to evaluate it truthfully. I'm not sure if that's what I just said, but that's what I'm saying now. But you can see, and if you don't, and then you have a toolbox that you can apply to everything. If you just sit there and wait for your purpose to arrive, you don't have the courage to try, you don't have any experiences to learn from, if you're not paying attention.
That's applicable to so many people, of that question of how do I find my purpose, is I think so many people want to, people are waiting around for that
They're
purpose.
waiting around for that to happen. Okay, and here's another part of that, you see. The reason they can't perceive is because their intuition is not sufficiently developed. If you just sit there, your intuition will not develop. You have to do something to awaken yourself, and you have to put out energy to change yourself. And then your intuition will sharpen, and then you'll know what you're supposed to do. But you won't learn what you're supposed to do just by sitting there waiting to be told.
So you have to just get out and start experiencing.
Well, you've got something in front of you to do. There's just, you have a plant that needs watering. I mean, you've got something in front of you to do where you can put out energy in a creative, positive, hopefully loving, hopefully serviceful way. But this is where I was saying, even somebody whose desires and their purpose is dark, they're still building a toolbox. They're using it to destroy. But when they figure out that they're using it to destroy instead of to build, they have a toolbox.
I think, like, looking back at like my life, is I've always pursued with the idea of expansiveness. I remember I was a bricklayer at one point, and I'd work a bricklayer. I used to do a lot of labor work, and sometimes I'd be working on the bricks, or I'd be painting walls or whatever it was. But I would really try and do it to my best of my ability, and I put a lot of passion into it. And I carried on that process until I told you about the business with the gym, and I didn't do that with that situation. I was very much about making money. I was motivated by financial external factors and I really invested in this idea and not the process, and not being in that moment of. That was a really big roadblock in my life, where once it was cleared, it changed a lot of things for me. But investing in the process and being in the moment and just trying to be, I really like the idea of expansive and learning. And I think that's really important. It's advice I try and give to some people, not in the way you've articulated it, but just start living passionately. You pour yourself into something, and you might be surprised.
Because you'll change yourself. And when you change your vibration, you perceive realities you didn't perceive before. And you magnetize opportunities to you that you wouldn't have magnetized if you had just been sitting there waiting for the opportunities to come. It's an energy universe. This is Einstein. This is modern physics. I'm a zero scientist, but I know that it is what they all say. It's all interrelated. It's all about energy. Another way to think of it is just always put out a little more energy.
What do you say to the people who are like, I go to work every day, but my boss is a tyrant. He hates me. He's always making me do stuff I don't want to do. I hate my job. Like, what would you say to people like that?
I would say, how is that attitude working out for you? And you can't make your boss better, and you probably can't live without working. So do we want to just get more and more miserable as time passes? Or is there any place in this story that you could think that maybe I could turn it? And you can't necessarily turn the whole thing, but do you want, is that, the vibration you're putting out is, I mean, like, who's going to respond to that? Other people, other things that go, nee, nee, nee. So you have to change your tone. So where in your life can you just do something that's expansive? And how can your boss is a tyrant? Is there anybody in your work that you can love and that you can serve? Is there, where can you move it? People just want to move the whole thing all at once, and they think if they can't lift the mountain, there's nothing to do. Just make an herb garden. I mean, where in your life can you begin to change the tone? And the other part of it is when a person has an overall attitude like that, you got to start. What part of that habitual attitude, where in your life can you shift that habitual attitude? You might not be able to do it with your boss. What about your dog? Can you be nicer to your dog? Can you be nicer to your plants? How about your wife? What about your mother-in-law? Because when it's all pervasive, it's got lots of tentacles. So you train yourself to be nicer to your dog on a consistent basis. And then you learn how to be nice. And then you're just a tiny bit nicer everywhere. You do a little bit better than your worst. You put out a little more energy. I'm a lousy housekeeper. I don't like dealing with my house. And I'm an old woman now, and I've always managed to have someone else clean it. That's just great for me. But I will do the dishes. But I won't always do them before I go to bed. But I like to put out a little more energy, so I'll stack them in the sink. Because that's a little better than my worst. And if you just make it a habit to be a little nicer and a little better than your worst, to put out a little more energy every time, you'll change your whole life.
The thing I was talking about, that idea of my boss hates me and all this kind of stuff, was a story that I'd heard. And I think it was, I don't want to, is probably a Tony Robbins convention, and a woman came up to him and said, explained exactly that, and said, I went to a new job, and I tried finding a new job, but it was the same thing. The boss was a tyrant, and did this, and this. And he said, just turn up tomorrow and find the nice things in that job. Whoever you like, greet them and be nice to them, open the door for people, smile, even smile at your boss who's horrible. And he met that person a year later, and she'd got a promotion, her boss was being nicer to her now, and it all changed. The perception had all changed for her. And I think so many of us, again, another thing I'm guilty of is, like, we might find one negative thing in our life, and it does leak in and seep into other relationships as well, into our partner, our family, and it could stem from work and having this negativity, but kind of bleeds into other things. And I think, like you say, we could start with being kinder to the dog, or being kinder, and that would bleed into other things as well, and can set the tone elsewhere. So I love the idea that we can take small steps.
Well, we have to take small steps. And one of the reasons people don't change is because they don't know they should take small steps. They think they should take giant steps. They're looking, their vision is up here, and they just don't know where their feet are. And you just don't get up there by staring up there. You get there by, oh, there's my feet, and here's my next step.
I think that's the same for so many things, though, is we have this big idea, and the problems are big, or they feel big, and the goals are big, and they feel big, but they freeze us completely into not taking any steps at all, because if we can't fix the big thing, then there's no point of trying at all.
But what you were describing about the woman who changed her attitude toward work, or at her job, wait just a second, the thought went away. Let me find it for a second. Oh, yes. Self-mastery. It's like, it's not really that my boss is awful. It's that I can't master my reaction to my boss. And so I'm not a slave of my boss. I'm a slave of my reaction to my boss. You see, this is the transition, the directional transition between thinking that the problem originates out there and realizing that the solution is in here. He may be a terrible boss, but him being a terrible boss just makes him miserable unless your reaction makes you miserable. So it's you that you can't control. And you think if you made him better, then I would stop reacting, but that's a myth. And we try that. I'm just going to get the world in order and then I'll be happy. I'm just going to get money. I'm just going to be famous. I'm just going to do this. And then I'll be happier. No, actually, you will be happier when you are able to have mastery over your reactions to what happens to you. And when that shift begins to happen, look at it. All the power is now in your hands. Instead of being a victim of life and just helpless in the face of it, all the power is with me. This is what I realized when I was 18 years old. Or yes, LSD gave it to me, but because it just said, oh my God, everything just emanates from my perception of it. And then it gets more subtle because we begin to understand that the actual reality of this universe is perfect divine love. And if I am not able to perceive perfect divine love in every situation, no matter how horrific, and this is, believe me, is super challenging. And so I never try to persuade anyone. I just mention it. If we're not able to perceive perfect divine love in every situation, well, I need to refine my inner perception.
Tough, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, tough.
Yeah.
Okay, but bear in mind, it's not complicated. Because it's tough, we think it's complex. It's not. It's extremely simple, but it's so simple that it takes away all our excuses, and then we have to work on it. It's simple because, you see, what the complexity is when we get farther out from our own center, there's billions of variables out here. And the more we get into our own center, the more we're getting into the oneness of spirit, the oneness of God. And so the closer we get, you see, the simpler it gets. But everything in us wants to blame and not be responsible and have it be somebody else's fault and please come, waiting to be rescued. That's what we're doing. We're just waiting to be rescued. And then at some point we realize, oh, it's up to me. You know, waiting to be loved, then I will. People will come to me, you know, if only I had a partner, then this would happen. And I often say, make a list of everything that you believe will happen when you have a partner. Some of those things you can't do by yourself, but every one of those things you can do by yourself, start doing them. Because not only will you have a happier life, but also, if those are the things that you want to have happen with a partner, if you start vibrating with those things, guess what? You may attract them. But if you're sitting there totally none of the things that you expect to be when you have a partner, why would anyone who would bring those things to you want to be with you? In other words, your magnetism is all wrong. And you're helpless and you're a victim and you're, you know, unhappy. And is this easy? Absolutely not. But in the end, meaning at the end of a certain rebellion in which we wish to declare reality ourselves, and this is the way it is, and that's what we want, we try that for a lot of incarnations, and then finally we say, what is really going on here? And then you reach a point where I'm by no means perfect in these things, and I still have my, well, I don't even want to tell you, but I do. They just put it like that. But at bottom line, I know there's no choice. And so I can do it now or I can do it later. But this is the way things are. That sounds negative. It's so much freedom because it's simple. You know, yes, so-and-so treated me really horribly. They're going to get bad karma for doing it. They're going to suffer because they were so awful. But I'm the one who's unhappy. And so, like, how does it serve me? How's that working out for you? You know, you get the pleasure of being right, but how is that working out for you? And at a certain point, you become convinced. Basically, I was born convinced. That's why I was so unsettled until I found a way to really start working again.
That point that you were talking about taking LSD, like, is that required? Like,
oh God, I hope not.
but people talk about like plant medicines now and these.
No, it's a big deal now.
Yeah, these quite big because I think obviously it's something that people want to find out. They want to find out about themselves and connect with themselves.
I mean, Swami Kriyananda, who was definitely not in favor of drug-induced experiences, had to admit that sometimes psychedelics are a catalyst. But what happens, and I'm not, well, I know more about this because I did grow up in the 60s. You know, we were way out there doing the whole thing. And then it's a chemical change to your brain. It's not an actual shift of consciousness. So you can chemically change your brain, and I know all people make a huge difference between plant and laboratory produced. My own opinion, although I've had more experience with laboratory produced than plant, I don't think it matters. Once it's inside of you, it's a chemical change to your brain. And I mean no disrespect, but that's my belief. It's a chemical change to your brain, which induces very interesting perceptions sometimes, you know. And so all of a sudden, because of a chemical change to your brain, you have very interesting perceptions. I watched the furniture dissolve into light. It was really notable. I can still see it, you know. And the fact that the furniture could dissolve into light had a tremendous effect on me. But as soon as the drug wore off, the furniture just sat there. And no matter how clearly I wanted it to dissolve into light, it never would do it again unless I changed the chemistry of my brain. And then, whoa, the furniture is dissolving into light again, which it never did, but that would have been nice if it had. But as soon as the chemical wore off, I was just back to being myself. I was changed I might be changed if I had perceived something that motivated me to actually start shifting my consciousness, so that I would actually transform, so that no matter what happened, my reactions and my understanding of reality would be different. The problem with chemically induced perception is that you just fall back to who you were before. Now, if the experience was profound enough that you actually are not merely theoretically and intellectually different, but your actual reactions are more compassionate, more kind, more courageous. Your ability to put out good energy, I mean, just all the things, that would be great. But what tends to happen is I keep wanting to have that experience. And then also what happens is you get confused about who you actually are, because you chemically induce a change that is you when it's happening. But then when there's no chemical in there, you're yourself. It's very confusing. Who am I? And I have not seen, that's the only thing I can say, I have not seen the kind of actual transformation and the actual expansion of light through the chemical or plant method, just chemically changing your brain. Now, there is a way that people are using these enhancers to see themselves more clearly. You know, with the microdosing, I get asked about the microdosing of these things. And it can give you a certain detachment that gives you more courage to see yourself. But it's not what happens during that is significant. It's whether or not you carry that back and become different. And I would love for there to be a marvelous shortcut like that. It would be just terrific if there was. It's a necessary stage, just like everything else. You know, I need to experiment with this. I need to find out whether or not this works. That would be about what I would say.
But you can find it without.
Oh, heavens, yes. It's absolutely, completely unnecessary, and no serious yogic path involves any of this. Back in my day, when it was Baba Ram Das, who was known as Richard Alpert at that time, who was one of the pioneers with LSD, eventually went to India and became a disciple of Neem Karoli Baba, who was a great saint of that time, a great yogi of that time. And Baba Ram Das, Richard Alpert, was convinced that LSD was the road to enlightenment. So he presented it to his guru. He had the LSD with him. He gave his guru a handful of these pills. He ate all of them. Zero effect on him. because his vibration was it didn't matter what happened to the chemistry of his brain. He wasn't operating through his brain. He was operating, and Richard Alpert was just totally shocked and horrified. But because he had faith in his guru, he had to abandon all of that because, yeah, it does something here, but this is where we're trying to go.
Wow.
And his guru just said to him, you're a child. This is a child's toy. This is not real. This is not real enlightenment.
Do you know anything else about that sort of story or time? Like, that's so interesting.
Well, Swami Kriyananda met a yogi in India also. And that it was the opposite with that. It was whiskey. It wasn't psychedelics. But I think I'm not sure about Baba Ram Das, but excuse me, about Neem Karoli Baba. But this Swami Narayan, he could drink 5 bottles of whiskey, and it didn't touch him because he was a complete master of his physical form. And merely to change the chemistry of his body was like changing his shoes. It didn't mean anything to him. And so it's not, if you're just changing your physical chemistry, you're not actually resolving your karma. You're not actually shifting your chakras. And unfortunately, it can give you a false sense of who you've become. And so now you're operating with the self-definition that makes you more enlightened than you actually are, which you can see how much confusion that can cause you between your sessions. When you're having a harder time being authentic, you may have a harder time being honest about your realities because you remember that the furniture dissolved into light. So I am a person who can dissolve furniture into light, or therefore when all the furniture dissolves into light, therefore I am one with the infinite being. So why should I work? Why should I be honest? Why should I put up with you? Why should I learn to be kind? You can see how it is.
No, you do see it though as well. So many things are coming to my mind right now about people who practice those kind of medicines, who 5, 6, 10 years into their social media careers of being these gurus or whatever, it all falls apart, and it's almost like they are confused as to who they are. They don't, they are dishonest, or they do invest in ego quite heavily, and these stories come out of them and you're like, well, that's not the person I thought they were.
And that's the good karma for them, because in one lifetime, when they still remember, they've tried something, and sometimes they were insincere, taking advantage, and sometimes they were quite sincere, and they really thought it was true. And now they know, they learned, hopefully they learned. When Swami Kriyananda, who, was a very, he was not a prudish or a small-minded man by any means, either in his behavior or his beliefs, but when we were all advocating for, a degree of sexual promiscuity that was not traditional, someone, asked him, we had the phrase, the sexual revolution, which was such a big story for us at that time. What do you think of the sexual revolution? Somebody said to Swami Kriyananda. And to everyone's surprise, and for our momentary applause, he said, well, overall, I think it's a good thing. And it was like, yippee. But then he said, I said, it's a good thing because you are making your own experience the criteria for your values. You're not just mindlessly accepting what someone else told you. He said, so it's a good thing because you're making your experience the criteria, provided that you're honest about that experience. And of course, that's the caveat. We either become addicted, or we become defensive, or we become so mentally confused that we can't think at all, and we just continue to defend something that if we were really honest, we would not be defending it anymore. And I've had people talk to me about having gotten quite involved. Ayahuasca is what people are doing these days, getting deep into the ayahuasca, and then coming back to me and saying, and raising serious questions about it. And they feel confused because there is this huge veneer of spirituality, and it's confusing. So we have to unpack it. What is your actual experience?
Ayahuasca is a big one.
Yeah, it's a very big one. I'm not much into the scene, but I keep track a little.
It's not something I've ever experienced, but obviously the conversations I've had with some of the people that we've interviewed, friends, the idea of a window into, I guess, that deeper level of consciousness or awareness, to me has always been like, oh, that's interesting. Like if I could just take something to do it.
Yeah, of course.
It'd be so amazing.
Isn't there a shortcut?
Yeah, is there a shortcut? And it's interesting. A good friend of mine does dabble in a lot of this stuff. And it just, one point that came up is he always ribbed me for being vegan and would take the mick out of me for years and years for being vegan. And he's much bigger, much stronger than me, and he eats a lot of meat. Is very into eating meat, steak, all that kind of stuff. And he started doing some of these retreats where there was plant medicines involved. And he did this one retreat, and he came back, and I was speaking to him the next day, and he was like, "You'll never guess like what I've came away with from this retreat." I was like, "What was it?" He was like, "I felt so connected with absolutely everything on planet Earth, all the animals, and I cannot think about eating another animal."
Good for him.
Good for him for 3 days, because eventually it faded and it went away, and he doesn't have that same feeling anymore. But for the 3 or 4 days afterwards, he could only eat watermelon and food and fruit. Sorry, and he'd reach this awareness. But I think when you say the confusion, there is some confusion there for him, because he knows that now.
Right, he knows that.
He has some form of awareness, but he's not reached it in a way that it's maybe resonated the right way, or
it's good because he's a little guilty now, and so he's a little guilty, and gradually he'll either suppress it, but he touched it. But see, there's another part of the whole chemical shifting of your brain, or plant shifting of your brain. I get so much, people try to persuade me that ayahuasca is different than LSD, but once it's in your body, it's what it does to your brain.
Yeah.
But in any case, the other part of it is wild, out of the body, strange furniture turning into light experience is not the definition of spirituality. Mm. Spirituality is when I respond to life completely differently. I become connected to a higher reality, and I can become an expression of that higher reality. And you don't ever have to have any big, wild experiences for that to happen. And in fact, experiences like that are often a distraction, even if you gain them without chemical interference, is because then your spiritual life is how much you can forget yourself and give, and be a channel for a greater consciousness, be an instrument of the divine. It's not, wow, I had this vision, I had that vision, this is so exciting, I felt this way, I did that. Mm. That's just a higher form of selfishness. Mm. It's total self-forgetfulness. How can I serve? How can I love? Mm. That's spirituality. How can I serve? How can I love? Greater can no love be than this. That we willingly give up a life for a friend. That was the story of Jesus also. I mean, nobody who is in an Orthodox Christian church would call me a Christian, but I am a great devotee of Jesus in a different addition to everything else. He was a great spiritual master, and he gave up his life. But it was more than just being crucified. He incarnated to help us. He had no karma. He had no reason to come into this world. He came into this world into a very difficult situation, suffered an extraordinarily, from our point of view, horrifying demise. But of course, he was not defined by his body. He could observe his body. He was in his body, but his reality was so much bigger. The suffering on the cross is misunderstood from the yogic point of view, but nonetheless, the sacrifice was not. Because what did it matter who he was? How can I love more? How can I serve? How can I help? You have countless examples of saints and martyrs and ordinary people who rise to extraordinary lengths to give. And it's thrilling. And they are blessed. That's who we're trying to be. But we know that happiness, we know that perfect happiness is our birthright. If we were meant to suffer, we would not rebel against suffering. We would just accept it. But we know it's wrong. But this world imposes it on us constantly. So there's this disconnect. And that's when we have to understand, oh, it's not what's being done to me. It's my self-mastery and my ability to see the perfect love of God in everything that happens. Tall order isn't...
Yeah, and I think my mind just goes to the extremes of, somebody who's in the middle of a war, or and facing suffering in that way. It's such a tough. I mean, you must have such a tough time of trying to. I don't know if you can explain that to somebody in that situation.
It's very, very, very difficult. Swami Kriyananda had this way of teaching, which I try to follow also, which is no matter how big the idea, he would try to bring it down to some example that we would understand. So when you're talking about someone in war, you're talking about circumstances turning in such a way that great suffering and great disappointment is going to be imposed upon him. He's going to lose his life or his health or whatever he might lose. But great suffering, great disappointment is going to be imposed upon him. So then think about it for a minute. I think about my life. Well, I'll start this way. This woman came to me once, and her most beloved sister had died young of cancer. And as children, they had always planned they would live their whole lives together. They would marry brothers. They would raise their children next to each other. The woman dies. So the woman talking to me says, I suffered in a way I did not know it was possible to suffer. The only recourse was to turn to prayer and to turn to God, which I had never done in my life. But my suffering was so intense, I prayed at a level that I didn't know could be done. And I received God's response in a way that I didn't know was possible. And as a consequence, she was from Europe. This was decades ago. She crossed the world to come to where I was teaching in our retreat to learn meditation and all the things that we had to teach. And then she talked about this whole world of spirituality that had opened up to her that she didn't even know was there, and all the things that were happening to her since then. So I took a terrible risk, and I said, well, do you think your sister's death then was a tragedy? Because look at all that's happened since then. And I mean, and so all of a sudden, everything shifts like that. For myself, the worst things that have happened to me, the most difficult things that have happened to me, have led me to understandings that I never could have had otherwise. So was it bad that those things happened? You see, all of a sudden, good and bad get very confused in your mind, because we think good is easy and pleasurable. We think bad is challenging and difficult. But from the superconscious perspective, from the divine perspective, I always think of God as Divine Mother. My loving mother, she's disciplining me. And she knows I don't like it. And she watches me have a tantrum. But she also knows that it's a lesson I have to learn. And if she listens to my tantrum and then just gives me what I want, will I grow up big and strong? No. But if she forces me to keep trying until I find a way through it, then I will grow up big and strong, and I will have become who she knows I can become. So if this young man is in war, and it's a horrible experience for him, what is Divine Mother trying to teach him? And it could just simply be to face the fear of physical violence. It may be the fear of death. It may be the need for him to have courage to risk his life for what he believes in. I mean, you could make countless lessons, because even dying doesn't matter if you've become what you were supposed to become, which you had the potential to become in this lifetime. So what is bad and what is good? But that also requires that there are no mistakes, and that there is a loving God, a loving Divine Mother, and all experiences are purposeful because they're taking us toward the true end of the story. So there's a whole lot that you have to put in that. that I've spent many years absorbing, and still, in the face of other people's suffering, I have to gather everything I know in order to, in my prayer, I have a very simple prayer. Divine Mother, whatever you're trying to teach them, help them to learn it. So that it won't be purposeless, but it'll help them because you go through it a bunch of times. And you realize it's not because your boss is terrible. It's not because I got drafted young. It's not because I don't have legs anymore. It's because of how I have responded to those experiences. And that when I have self-mastery, what difference does it make?
And I think it is very tough to swallow some of that. But I agree with you. I think it's really hard to articulate to people that if you work through it in the right way, some of the worst stuff that happens to you is also brings some of the greatest joys and happiness and bliss. But
so you see, where is the end of that? You didn't know that before it happened. Mm-hmm. You expanded to a point you learned something. How much is in front of you? How many times could you do that? And how far does it go? Because before it happened to you, you would not have believed it. So you're standing here and you don't believe it. And listen, I travel a great deal all over the world. Sooner or later it comes to, what about the suffering children? And there you are. You're right up against the hardest part of it. Are they innocent? They're innocent in the present moment. Did they have any karma from before? You see, it's a complete system. And is it necessarily a bad thing to be challenged? Mm. You could easily say that the worst thing that happens to someone is because you go to the gym. I don't go to the gym. It bores me. But you go to the gym. You put as much weight as you can on what you're lifting. You don't just go there and say, I can lift 5 pounds and then lift it for an hour and go home. You make it so hard you can barely do it. Why do you do that? Because you want to get strong. It's not any fun, or maybe you enjoy it, but it's not because it's fun, but because the result of it is fun. So we want to come into our lives and we never want to have to lift anything heavier than a pencil. And Divine Mother, you're a child, and you say to your mommy, Mommy, I'm just going to eat chocolate cake from now on, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And Mommy says, honey, you won't grow up big and strong if you eat chocolate cake every day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then the child, with infallible child logic, says, yes, I will, based on zero information. But that's what I want. Mm. And so we look at the world and we say, no, it should be different. They should have chocolate cake, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then God says, but they won't grow up big and strong. And we say, yes, they will. Yes, they will. We don't know what we're talking about. We're just making it up. And if we're honest about our experience, we see it very differently.
I think it's where reincarnation comes in as quite that changes a lot of...
You have to have reincarnation. It's absolutely, totally crazy without reincarnation. Absolutely. You have to have reincarnation. You have to have karma, which is to say something that runs through all the incarnations. And you have to have a vehicle for doing it, which is the chakras. And then you also have to have a loving God. Otherwise, it's just hell.
Just on that, actually, as well, it's relevant to the idea of being in pain from losing somebody, like this idea that we suffer when we lose somebody, but also that suffering is our own suffering and created and designed by ourselves too, by the idea of, it's so terrible to say, but somebody said this to me one time. I was like, well, how do you, if you lose somebody that you loved, how's that me and not God who's done that to me? Or that feels like suffering. It feels like a lot of pain to me. And I remember them saying to me that if somebody on this side of the world who you didn't know, who you weren't invested in, who you didn't love, dies, and you heard of the story, they died, would you feel so upset? Would you feel so sad? And I really started to realize that, actually, I do have a part to play in this as well. Like, there's some of it that's my investment in this, and I'm causing a lot of the suffering as well to myself.
But that story doesn't go in a place where you really want to go, because it goes to that you should love less and be less, and open your heart less. So you have to be careful with that story. Okay, here's a way to think about it. you know, first of all, you don't own anybody. You can be very close to people and you can love them with your whole heart and sacrifice everything out of your love for them. And if it's appropriate, it's very noble to do. Parents and their children. You know, when you're child, you don't realize how much your parents are sacrificing to raise you. You just think it's their job. It's not until you get older. I was upset because my father was so unspontaneous. And then I realized he was quite spontaneous until the three of us were born. And, you know, I'm just like, I who made him unspontaneous. It was very unfair until I got older. But the point is, love inspires us, and it's powerful. Okay, but just give me a second. I'm losing the thought. Let me find it here for a moment. But you don't own that soul. That soul has its own destiny. And if a soul lives a long life or a short life, or finishes their story, or just walks out in the middle. I mean, all around us, we see all these things. War is just one example. Car accidents. You know, you get up in the morning and you don't come home at night because some drunk driver drove across the road. And so, but our incarnation lasts as long as it is beneficial to us to have it last. Beneficial in the sense of that we have an opportunity to grow. We also interplay with each other, which is, you know, I'll be your child, but I'm going to leave early because that's going to help you learn something you wouldn't learn otherwise. So we make these agreements with each other and we help each other in this way. But every soul is acting out its own story, and we feel better if that story matches what I've already decided I want. And this is, again, where our relationship to the divine has to come into this, our relationship to our superconsciousness, where we recognize, no, this is not going to come out the way I want to write it, that there's a better plan here than the one that I know. That doesn't mean your heart doesn't break when hard things happen. Swami Kriyananda had to instruct me on that more than once in his life. He said, just because I remain calm, he said to me about himself, he said, doesn't mean I don't feel things very, very deeply. In fact, he said, I'm more sensitive than almost anyone, because he was conscious, but he remained calm about it. But that didn't mean that he didn't feel the suffering. It was that he lived on multiple dimensions at the same time. Ramakrishna, Sri Ramakrishna, the avatar, he was. Many people thought he was mad because he was so peculiar. He had a nephew who was his attendant, who took care of him. We spent all his time together. His nephew's name was Hridai. Hridai got ill and died. And Ramakrishna, in front of his disciples, he was dancing in ecstasy. He said, when Hridai died, I saw his soul leave his body. I saw it merge into the infinite light, and he was dancing in joy because Hridai had transcended. Then in the next second, he was weeping like a child. My best friend has gone. Who will walk with me by the Ganges in the morning? Who will bring me my morning tea? How will I ever get along? And then the next moment, he would talk again about seeing Hridai gone into the infinite. So he lived all the levels at the same time, which is not easy. Because when somebody leaves us on this world, we're so conscious of the loss that we forget to think about the wonderful journey that they're now on. And we want them not to have that journey. We want them to have the one I wanted. You see, all the pieces have to fit together. Otherwise, you're not able. That's the only way you can attain self-mastery, is you have to continually explore the possibilities, do those things that will give you experience of those possibilities, introspect, and be honest about your experience. But you can't say, oh, I'm not going to really love, I'm not going to care that much, because that makes you small. Mm-hmm. Another way that I thought about it in my life was when I was in a situation where I was very easily hurt, and I had to put my trust in someone, and I had reason to trust them, but nobody's completely trustworthy because things happen. It's like you start out in one place and everybody changes and it gets different. And they don't mean necessarily to betray you, but they do betray your expectation because the person who made that promise no longer exists for whatever reason. We've all been through a lot of things like this. Divorce is the main one that happens that way. So do I trust this person, or do I trust that God is going to give me the experiences I need in order to grow? And if you know that God is going to give you the experiences you need in order to grow, what do you have to be afraid of? You can wish that you don't have to suffer. That's perfectly natural. But when suffering is imposed upon you, and you did the wrong thing, you betrayed me, the world is no damn good, all that. Or, well, I opened myself to life, and then God did with me what he needed to have done and will give me the strength to get through it.
I think a lot of us a lot of us who watch these videos, myself included, we have the awareness that the lessons are there, and that a lot of the stuff the bad stuff that we face is a lesson, but you're still stuck between the two of.
Oh, you're stuck between the two worlds. There you have it, my friend. That's exactly it. We're stuck between the two worlds. And that's the job. The job is, as long as I can, but you see, Divine Mother may escalate the stakes. So she may put you in a concentration camp. Can you still love if you're in a concentration camp? Can you still trust if you're a concentration camp? You have to ask that question. Or you may have to go through it, or both. But if it's true anywhere, it has to be true everywhere. It can't be a system that's just dropped in every once in a while. And this is why very few people get that serious about the spiritual path. But once you start, it just keeps opening out in front of you, and you just have to persevere. And that itself is tremendous freedom. That's called faith. But it's not faith, dogmatic faith. It's faith in my own experience, that if it's always been true up until now, it will be true in the future, even if this one seems too big for me. If I just don't give up, and I don't run away, or even if I do, it's still going to be true.
Some of the conversation points that we've had, there was a few quotes that I'd written down that Yogananda had said that I think would be interesting to sort of hear your opinion on. They're relevant to what we've been speaking about. And I really love this one. It was, the wave is a part of the sea, but when it forgets that it is the sea, it becomes ego.
Yes, in fact. Ego is a very interesting word, and it's an important word to understand properly. Many people either glorify the concept of ego, or they consider the ego the enemy. You get onto the spiritual path and the ego is your enemy, and you're always at war with yourself, and that's not really a very healthy thing. Ego, the way Yogananda defined it, ego is the infinite self identified with limitation. And so the ego thinks that I am the body, that I am the things that I'm doing, the things I possess, the power I have over the world, the sensual enjoyments I have, that my sense of self is identified with the limited aspect of my nature. I don't see myself as a transcendent being, as one with the infinite, as a child of God. I don't live in that definition. So what he's saying is, we are all waves on the infinite sea, and we're never separate from the greater reality, but a wave can give the appearance of being separate. And so if we lose touch with the force that's bringing the wave up and the substance of which the wave is made, and then we just get at the tip of the wave and think that that's all that there is, that's ego. Because that's the ocean itself defined by this little tiny bit of water at the top. And among other things, inevitably that wave is going to go down. So no matter how hard you try to stay at the apex of the wave, you're doomed, because sooner or later the wave will collapse. But if you know yourself to be one with the infinite ocean, and even though you're enjoying the ride up as the wave and you're doing all the things that you do in your human physical incarnation, you're not egoic about it, because you know that you're just an expression of the ocean, and therefore you don't feel like you have been destroyed when the wave goes back into the ocean. And also, you have so much more, you have limitless energy to draw from, because if you only think that you're the tip, you don't know where it's coming from. But if you can always also know that everything that manifested this wave is the whole ocean of which I am a part, then for one thing, your power is unlimited and your freedom is unlimited, because what am I afraid of? What do I have to lose? How could I be lost? But if I'm just the tip and the tip is absorbed back in, then I panic. I panic when my circumstances change. I panic when I die. I panic when other people die. And that is the ego that has limited myself to a very vulnerable entity, completely unnecessarily. So that's why the image works so beautifully all the time.
Is the enemy being invested in the ego, not the
enemy
ego
is
itself?
being defined by limitation. And it's not the fact, and so you don't want to be at war with yourself and say, oh, well, it's just ego. No, it could be divine inspiration coming through you. But if you are defined by the infinite energy which flows through you and expresses uniquely as you, and you can see that exists, that limited reality also exists. My ego is my individuality, but I'm not defined by it. It's that I am a great ocean of spirit, and the water of the ocean has come up into this beautiful wave, and I am the wave, but I am not only the wave. It's just as simple as that. So because even a master has an ego in the sense that he is defined by one particular body. He's only that one body, but he doesn't, his self-definition is not that one body. And we're responsible for this one. You have to do it. This is your story. You have to do it well. Swami Kriyananda would say, I never define myself as Swami Kriyananda. I consider Swami Kriyananda an event for which I am responsible. And being responsible for that event, he must carry it out as best he can. But it's an event for which he is responsible. So when the event goes well, that's nice. When the event goes badly, it doesn't mean that his life is over. It just means that, well, the event is going badly. This is him saying, because I'm calm, it doesn't mean that I don't feel what's going on, but I'm never, my self-definition is so much bigger. This is a crisis now. Something happened once that was very unfortunate, and it was an international magazine, all these things. Swamiji said, this could be very embarrassing for me. He said, if I chose to be embarrassed, but I choose not to be. Just, it's like it happened. It was an embarrassing situation, but it's not, I'm more than this. I exist in this, and it happened here, and that's the ocean versus the wave. But if you're a wave, you've got to be a darn good wave. It's important, because otherwise you're lazy, or you're not striving for excellence.
Just on that point, just to finish off so ego is not the enemy.
No, ego is not the enemy. Ego is just an aspect of being a human being. It's when you allow yourself to be defined by your limitations. That's what ego is. Ego is the infinite self, falsely identified with the limited aspects, instead of the infinite aspects.
I think that's where just the current, especially with social media, current online or current perception is that we have to be polarized, like with these things, these thought processes, that the ego cannot be, if it's not good, it has to be the enemy. If it's, it can't be good, it can't be, or it's really, really bad and we have to invest in it. Like, the polarizing opinions is so difficult to navigate sometimes, I think. So finding, I don't know, a moment where it's not noisy, where it's not, that. So where should we go when it feels like everything's just noisy? There's loads of different mixed messages coming in. There's the polar opposite opinions coming in. Where's a good place to go to sort of break from that and find maybe our truth of what we feel is?
Well, this planet is stunningly noisy. I mean, Restaurants are loud, and the only airplane I actually missed an airplane. I was sitting on an expensive, non-refundable ticket. I was sitting at the gate, but right in front of me was this huge video screen flashing these advertisements, and it was so annoying to me, I turned my back on it. And when I turned around, now there was a malfunctioning watch in the picture, but when I turned back around, the plane had left. But I could not stand to face that video screen, so I turned my back and missed a plane. It was a crazy day. There's a lot going on. I go to put gasoline in my car, and there's a video screen playing at me. So you have to really control your environment. And you're also saying, well, social media is always assaulting you. My friend, don't open your phone. It's not hard. Just don't do it. You have to actually say, more is not helping me. Just more is not helping me. And you have to interiorize that experience sufficiently. Look at your environment. Is your environment accelerating the is your environment accelerating the confusion in the sense of chaos, or is it calming it down? What are you bringing into your consciousness? A certain amount can't be avoided, but an enormous amount of it can be avoided. How are you spending your time? What kind of music? How frantically are you trying to keep up? How naively are you just thinking that anybody with a camera who can post it is worth listening to? What is the source? What is the lineage of what they're saying? What common sense does it make? But you have to spend time doing something else. Being quiet, being in nature, being healthy, listening to uplifting things, not merely more things. But our society mitigates against it, which means you have to be original, and you have to be courageous, and you have to make choices. Yeah, the society is just, it's wonderfully confused, just stunningly, impressively, magnificently confused. It's a collapsing civilization, honestly. Yeah. This is what it looks like when a civilization collapses. I mean, historically. And it is. It's just pushed itself so far. And it's also true in terms of the prophecies of the masters and so on. This whole thing is just getting up to a frenzy of explosion. And it's driving people crazy. And those who notice need to take a stand. It's completely within our control.
Just a quick interruption for the video, guys. As many of you know, we are independent creators and filmmakers, but there is a massive attack on us right now. Traditional media over the last few years has started to slowly die. They are no longer the independent voice that you first thought they were. That's why we've created Mulligan Brothers Patreon. We've built something special for our most dedicated supporters, and I want to break it down for you real quick. The supporter tier gets you ad-free early access to both video and audio versions of Mulligan Brothers interviews 24 hours before it goes public. The executive tier gets you everything that a supporter tier gets, plus more. Exclusive interviews and behind the scenes content, walk and talks, daily routines, unreleased interviews, the stuff that you don't see anywhere else. And finally, the executive producer tier. Everything from the supporter tier and the executive tier, plus exclusive perks. Access to our treatment packages. Be the first to see which guests are coming up and get insight into the topics we'll be discussing before anyone else. And you'll even get an executive producer credit on every single documentary that we make. So if you've ever wanted to support the Mulligan Brothers mission of inspiring change so we can go around the world and get these stories that nobody else will, this is exactly how you do it. Go to patreon.com/Mulligan Brothers or click the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen. Join the community and help us inspire change. Let's dive back into the video.
When you talk about this time period of the frenzy that we're in, or the collapse, are we talking like hundreds of years, thousands of years, tens of years?
Well, let me think about that. In 1950, Yogananda spoke, Swami Kriyananda says, who heard him speak. He spoke on Sunday, and it made you think it was going to happen on Monday. And all through the years that I knew Swamiji, he was often referring to Yogananda's prophecies in terms of, Now is a very good time to become strongly centered in yourself. Now is a very good time to make spiritual progress, to learn spiritual practices, to become adept, to be less dependent on all of these external things that we're so used to. Now is a very good time to do it. He gave a whole series in the 80s, building spiritual power against troubled times. Let's get ahead of the curve. Don't wait to be driven by extreme suffering. Just get out ahead of it. Be in motion. So when things start pushing, you'll already be moving toward the light. Really, move toward the light willingly. And almost every year that I knew Swami, he would speculate. He would look at the news or whatever, and he'd say, maybe this is the year. And so we did that for 45 years. And it became a joke that Swami himself would laugh at. But the forces are in place. So when those forces will escalate, as Swami put it, time is the hardest thing in prophecy. Because you can see the inevitability of the energy, you can see the momentum building, and you can see the inevitable consequences of that momentum. But exactly when all those forces will come together is difficult. And there is the somewhat mitigating factor. Unfortunately, I don't believe, and Swami never endorsed, that there was sufficient mitigation to really change the direction. But Mother Mary of Medjugorje, who told people to do the rosary like 3 hours, pray 3 hours a day, is what she said. And she actually said, in Medjugorje, Mary's been coming for 30 years, and she still comes. She says, I think one of the 10 catastrophes or whatever it was has been mitigated because people have responded, because they have created a balancing energy. The momentum is of confusion and self-indulgence and selfishness and excessive materialism and racial hatred, racial bigotry and religious bigotry. And so when people start moving in an opposite direction, it's just energy. So if every time someone acts in an unselfish, loving way, and every time anyone attunes themselves to the divine power, they're counteracting the other momentum. So with all of those different forces in play, it's a little hard to say when. However, simultaneously, you can see how insanely ratcheting up it is. I'm an American. I live in the USA. We are living in unprecedented times in this country. I'm almost 80 years old. I've seen a lot. I've never seen anything like what we're doing now, happening so fast, changing so many fundamental systems, just completely reconstructing the government without any basically the national character. It's just completely shifting. As an American, it's very disturbing to me, and I don't see it stopping. So I watch that happen and think, I wonder where this is going to go, because there's so much involved. So I don't know. But the question is, what am I going to just try to hang on until the water's up to my neck? Because the whole point is, clearly, this is a good time to think about the light. This is a good time to try to become an instrument of the light. This is a good time to try to build a little inner power, because I don't know how much more intense this is going to get, if for no other reason than just the news is so heartbreaking. Just absolutely heartbreaking. I can hardly bear it sometimes. So it's an enormous incentive for me to become stronger, just for my own heart. And what if the things that are happening from where I am in California on the other side of the world, what if they start happening down the street? And we're close to that with some of the things that are going on in this country. I would like to be able to hold my center and to be able to be helpful rather than sucked into the undertow.
If it doesn't change, does it reach a fever pitch? Does it reach a time where it is there a singularity, like a moment that happens where it
reach critical mass?
War, yeah, like some kind of world war or something.
Well, Yogananda spoke of 2 world wars. And, but of course you have nuclear weapons. So I don't know. I'm not an expert on warfare. I don't know how that's going to work in this country. I wonder about civil unrest. I live in Silicon Valley, which is an extremely liberal. I live in California in Silicon Valley, which is a very liberal area, although there are a lot of variants here. During COVID, there was a shop, all during the COVID thing, and there was always a line around the corner from that shop. Turns out it was a gun store. So all my neighbors, every day, people were buying guns in an area of the country that you do not think about, where people have a lot of guns. So every so often I think, I wonder where all those guns are, and I wonder who has them. And how will they be used, and when will they be used? I don't know. Mm. And I'm not being, I need to say something here. Even though I sound really pessimistic, I'm not at all pessimistic. And this is important. Let me get really cheerful here for a minute. Yeah. I used to be very pessimistic, and even what I'm saying, I don't think this is pessimistic. I think it's just self-evident. It's just self-evident what's going on. And it is going to happen. So it doesn't serve me to live in a dream world where I want it to be different. But simultaneously, and I have been in many countries over the last few years, everywhere, there are so many people who are doing things to expand the light. And just amazing things. I've been in Estonia, I've been in Latvia and Lithuania, I've been in Japan, I've been in South America, I've been in Argentina, I've been in Ecuador there. I was in South Africa. I've been a lot of places around the United States. I've been in a lot of places in Europe, all of this. I've seen a lot of, different things like this. Everywhere. So many people are just filled with light and so enthusiastic about it, in doing it in countless ways, taking care of animals, growing organic food. Vegan restaurants abound in places where you would never expect them. And they're popular. They're doing really super well. People are meditating all over the place. They're reading spiritual books. They're talking about the beauty of nature. They're preserving the natural forests. They're just doing everything that you can think of that's moving us toward the light. And there's lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of them. But they're not in the news. They're not, because the news media is running they're running in a different dimension. I feel like and for myself, there's just two different worlds that are going on now. I really don't belong to the political world. And the world events world, I pay a little bit of attention to it because I think it's irresponsible, but it takes about this much information for me to get the drift, that this is what's happening. And it's kind of like it comes in with the water. You're going to get the news no matter what, whether you want to or not. I don't have to search for it. At a certain point, it's just gossip, and it's going to do its thing. And meanwhile, I'm doing everything I can on this side to expand the light, inspire people, celebrate people who are expanding the light, and there are a lot of us. And when all of that chaos, which may intrude on my world, but when it's all finished, we are the future. And I actually think it will take us approximately 5 minutes to get organized, because it's obvious. I have 4 apples, you have none. Here, take 2 of mine. It's a no-brainer. And I don't need more territory than I need for my little house here. I don't need my country to have more and be bigger than you. It's just what a crazy idea. That's all the idea when you're separate from me and I'm better than you. But I'm not separate from you. I'm not better than you. We're just all in this together. It's the most obvious common sense. When I have tried over the years to explain how our Ananda community works, and I've been a spokesperson for decades, well, how do you solve conflicts? What are your rules about this? How do you do this? We don't have any of those rules because we all meditate. We're all dedicated to high ideals. We all look first to thinking about how can I be better, then how can you change? And we have our issues. A lot of things happen. Trust me, it's no escape from karma. Karma follows you wherever you are. But our resolution of it is not by trying to get my position over yours. It's okay, we have a difficulty, we disagree. Let's all of us try to just figure out how to solve this. Sometimes it's easier than others. Some conflicts go on for a long time, but it takes us 5 minutes to get organized. It's like we're all in it together. Everybody's a child of God, and we're all trying to learn. And that is growing, exponentially all over the planet. But these guys have to finish their story first. Because for some reason, this is why we were born. I mean, I know why I was born. I was born to do this in the face of that and to plant the seeds. The timing, will I, at this stage of my life, really see a better time? What Yogananda said is after all these wars and all this conflict, there will be, he said, many centuries of unprecedented peace and prosperity in the world. I look at my young friends and I think, what's the trajectory of your life going to be?
When you talk about, I don't know, like war, peace, all these kind of things, I think about this idea of pacifism and even passive action, sitting and meditating on it, and that kind of thing. I think some of the conversations we've spoken about today are about taking action.
Yes, they are, exactly.
Yeah, and stuff like that. So like that kind of energy about taking action, pushing forward, doing those, maybe having to take action in the face of evil or stuff like that.
No, you do. Absolutely. Swami put it really simply. Sometimes you can't just chant Om. You have to stand up and do something. He said you have to meet every reality on its own level. Mm. And if the reality is, if you're a God-realized master and can change, stop the storm and calm the seas and transform the hearts of the evil, but even when they could, they rarely did. Jesus could have escaped. Even now, a legion of angels would rescue me, he said, but it's not my Father's will that it happen, because of the destiny he had to follow out for 100 other reasons. But yes, sometimes you just have to meet reality on its own level, and sometimes evil has to be combated. In fact, Yogananda said even in higher ages, there will need to be a world police force, because there will always be bullies, he said, and they will have to be contained. And the Bhagavad Gita is the story of a war, and there is such a thing as righteous war. It's just sometimes you have to meet it on its own level. But different people have different destinies. But that also means if you actually have the power to meditate so deeply that you are really radiating powerful rays of love and blessing to the world, then that's a much higher duty than picking up a gun. But it's not your karma anymore to have to die for the cause. You can serve better by channeling that divine energy, because everything is energy. But if you're either cowardly or lazy, and you'd rather hide in your room than actually face what has to be faced, and pick up your sword if necessary, it's all directional. What is forward for one person may be backward for someone else. And so it's extremely individual as to what is appropriate. I myself, even though at this point I don't participate in any what you might call political or anything like that, it does not feel like my job. For a long time I felt all the problems of the world are a matter of the human heart. And so I've devoted myself to trying to help people open their hearts to each other and to God. And when that is in place, everything else will follow. I can imagine, however, a point of moral imperative when some other kind of action would be required of me. And I remained completely open to that. Because, of course, it could happen. Being raised in a Jewish family, you have to think back to the Second World War. You have to think about the people who took the babies out of the Warsaw Ghetto before it was burned. And I sort of, in my own mind, it's like, if I'm called upon to do that, I will have to do it. But part of what I don't need to practice doing that in advance. What I need to do is to be inwardly calm and attuned enough that I will be able to hear the call if that's what I need to do next, because it may be correct. But a person who follows a different way of doing it, it may be the right course for them because, but cowardice and fear is not the same. And that's what we always have to work with. Sometimes out of fear, people will try to rationalize things. But that doesn't mean everybody who's rationalizing it is fearful. You just have to be introspective and self-honest.
There's a lot of people who have explained that they felt like they've been sleeping for the last few years, like they've been sort of on autopilot, not felt like they've had awareness or been like in tune to their consciousness. How do we break free of that sort of, that shadowy sort of sleepy feeling and wake up?
I think you have to take some dynamic, direct action, but not too much at the same time. You know, you have to begin to make changes, specific, doable changes. You have to know where your feet are and you have to take the next step. If your diet is lousy, if you're smoking marijuana every day, if you're taking 3 beers before you go to sleep at night, maybe reduce to 2 beers and only smoke marijuana every other day. I mean, just do something that will enliven you and stop deadening you. What else? If your diet is really terrible, if the music that you listen to is really depressing, if you're watching television all the time, if you never go out in nature, think about doing something else that'll bring a different vibration into you. Pick something that you can actually do it consistently, then add something else. People will change when the experience of the present misery is worse than the imagined misery of making a change. And they will not change until that balance tips. And so even if they don't like it, they complain about it, they prefer it to the effort of making a change. And only when you're so miserable that you really can't stand it a moment. I mean, talk to anybody who's overcome a great addiction. They call it hitting bottom. It's just you reach a point where it's so terrible that even though this is terrifying, I'll move in that direction. And you won't change until then.
Yeah, I think that's the bit where I'd love to be able to articulate to people how to make that change without having to hit rock bottom.
If you can do it, explain it to me. You have to be practical in your idealism. Oftentimes people push too hard all at once. I mean, I know addiction theory is something else, drugs and so on. I mean, you can't just, you can cut back, but you have to stop at a certain point. But basically you have to do something. Do the best you can do, just make it better. There's a story about a yogi who was initiated by Yogananda into the meditation practice. He was also an alcoholic, which is when you're meditating, you're trying to expand and elevate your consciousness. When you drink alcohol, you're depressing your consciousness. So they basically work opposite. Alcohol drives you into your subconscious. Meditation is trying to go into your superconscious. So he was an alcoholic, but he also had an aspiration to be a yogi. And when you practice Kriya, you often have a prayer mala, the yogic equivalent of a rosary. And so he would meditate with his prayer mala in one hand, doing his Kriya exercise, which involves the breath and the inner energy, and a bottle of whiskey in the other. Literally, this is a true story. And he would do some meditation practice. He would drink a little whiskey. He would do more meditation practice, and more narrow-minded, judgmental people basically say, how dare you, desecrate the master's teaching by drinking whiskey. He said, I can't do anything about my alcoholism, my drinking, but I can at least add something good to my life. And he said, I don't know how long it was, months or years, but he just continued that. And then one day he looked at the prayer mala, he looked at the whiskey, he put the whiskey down, he never picked it up again. But that was what it took. So don't worry about what isn't going right. Just start adding into your life something that is going right. And then you're swimming then with the divine current. And it may startle you how that current begins to take you. But don't concentrate on your faults. Just concentrate on what you can do that's good, whatever it might be. And then do as much of it as you can. But see, part of why people don't change is that it's long and it's hard. And we want it to be easier. There you have it, self-mastery.
That idea of reaching, I feel, I've heard you speak about super consciousness.
Right,
Is
the
that
super
right?
conscious.
And I feel like a lot of people are just trying to reach conscious level. Yeah.
Yes, in fact, that's true. But you see, it's all directional. The lowest stage, the beginning stage, is just, and this is like each stage is, how do I try to alleviate suffering? What do I consider? Mainly, how do I try to alleviate suffering? At the lowest level, I try to alleviate suffering by dulling my consciousness. Just by having a dull brain, by not thinking, by checking out, just like you're saying, by sleeping through my life, literally sleeping through my life, or drinking or taking drugs or watching television or becoming a sex addict or any of the things that you do. And we all exist on all these levels in different parts of ourselves. We're not one even system. I read novels. That's my great. I can't stand to be in my own mind anymore. I'm going to read a novel. And at different times, I suffer from what I call TMN, too many novels. That's just because there's a belief, a deep belief, that if I can just get away from it, it'll be better. And it's not entirely terrible. Swamiji watched movies, sometimes, and we just rest. But if you're fundamentally, how I alleviate my suffering is dulling my consciousness. And then you realize that you still suffer because dullness itself is suffering. I was made for more than this. And so then accidentally somehow you find, and I was saying this earlier, accidentally somehow you find out that if I put out a little energy to get something I want, I get what I want. And so at first, then we move to the level where I'll put out energy if there's something in it for me. I alleviate suffering by getting more for me. And so we then were motivated to put out energy to get more for me, which is a lot of what you see in our society now. People put out energy as long as there's something in it for me, looking out for number one. But that's progress. If your lazy uncle who's just been sleeping on the couch and mooching off the rest of the family suddenly decides that he wants to go to law school and become a sharp lawyer and make millions of dollars, you would cheer him. That's progress. If Mahatma Gandhi, who was also an attorney, in the middle of freeing India, decided, wow, I'm so famous, if I became a lawyer now and had my own practice, I'd make millions of dollars, everyone would think he'd gone backwards because it was forward for one and backwards for the other. So, but if you have never put out any energy and suddenly realize if I put out energy to get for myself, I'm happier, then you start doing that. And then somewhere along the way, you notice that the real fun is putting out energy. And the get for myself becomes only incidental. And then somewhere accidentally you discover that if I actually put out energy and help someone else, it feels even better. But you also think that the way I alleviate my suffering is to make the world obey me, right? And then you gradually figure out that, as I was saying earlier, the world won't obey me, and I have to change myself. So that's the third stage. And then as you begin to discover who you are, you gradually discover your relationship to divinity and the power and the presence of God. So the fourth stage is, why would I suffer? Everything is by God's will. And you move through it. So, but those who still think that the way to alleviate suffering is to be dull rather than put out energy, there you have it. Just talk to them about the different kinds of whiskey or whatever it is that they want. But you can't talk to them about something that they have no comprehension of. Just none. It's a waste of time and energy.
What's the difference between consciousness and superconsciousness?
Well, there's three basic levels: subconscious, conscious, and superconscious. And they're somewhat distinct areas. Subconscious has psychological meanings, which are true, but in this context, I use it differently. Swami uses it differently. Subconscious is everything that you already are, including all your past lives. Everything that is already behind you that has become your habitual fallback, this is who I am. It's neither expansive nor creative. It's not particularly courageous. It's not original. It just repeats, just like an older person. I mean, there was this couple that I knew. They were in their 80s, which I thought was quite old at the time. Now I think it's just the middle of life, but okay. And she was wide awake totally in the present, able to relate to everybody on their own terms. He was a very nice man, but he would sort of sit there until something happened that he could pull into the arena of his past, and then he would be able to relate to what was being said now only on the basis of what he already knew. He was just in his subconscious to that extent. Even though he was talking on the conscious level, he wasn't asleep, but his only reality was what he already knew. He couldn't relate to anything that didn't already fit in. And that's why we just repeat the same old patterns. What I always say, what I always do, when this happens, this is where I go. And it just takes the least amount of energy, and nothing ever changes. This is why God kills us off at a certain point, because we're just dead in the water. We're just repeating the old story. Some people become like that very young, even. They just never learn anything new. They just repeat the subconscious. Subconscious has a lot of attracting power because it's a really deep groove. Every time I see a black dog, I'm afraid. It's a boom, there it goes. Conscious and subconscious is also completely subjective. I mean, and when you think of subconscious as sleep and dreams, you could be lying right next to someone. You can be having an experience that involves them, but when you wake up, they know nothing about it. And it's also the level in which mental unbalance exists, because I've become so habituated to the way I think things are that my reality does not coincide with anybody else's. So it's very contractive, extremely contractive to be in your subconscious. Conscious level is what we normally are when we're awake. But we're always being influenced, so we can be wide awake, but still be influenced by subconscious or superconscious. But conscious is more shared. We're still not unified, but it's a lot easier. If we all go to Hawaii, we might come back with different stories, but it's clear that we're all in the same place. Whereas if you're totally in your subconscious, it could be a completely different thing. And so we live in our conscious where it's more energetic. And then the superconscious above it is where our consciousness expands in an ever-opening arc, you might say. And there's just no limit. We go up into ever higher dimensions. We separate. Our identity is no longer bound by the brain and by the body that we're in. And we're no longer bound by all the experiences that we had before. We're completely open to entirely new realities. That's where great art comes from. That's where true inspiration comes from. That's where pure love comes from. And that's where self-sacrificing kind of love comes from, because you're just spreading out everything that's new. And the conscious level is the battleground between these two forces. A part of us, a part of who I am, is my superconscious. It's always whispering to me, oh, you could be more than you are. You could be more joyful than you are. You could be more forgiving. You could be more loving. You don't have to be afraid. You could serve. You could give. And my subconscious says, oh, that would be hard. I don't want to do that. They betrayed me before. They're just going to betray me again. Why would I risk it? Superconscious says, please, come ahead, try. And the conscious mind is just battling. I mean, it's the angel and the devil in a very real sense, sitting on our two shoulders, our angelic, expansive, and our limited side. And so we're all, but the superconscious kind of whispers. That's the problem. It speaks intuitively. It doesn't blast out at you. And we have to be interested in hearing. And the more we respond, the more we open that channel. And when you do creative work, I mean, when you're really in a creative flow, it's the superconscious. It's telling you something new. Or sometimes we're creative, but we're just repeating what we've already done. We think we're creative, but we're not. We're just repeating what we've already done, because the subconscious can't make up anything new. It can rearrange the pieces, but the superconscious can tell us things that we've never imagined. And that our process is to escape from the subconscious and to become receptive to the superconscious. Which you can do. You can live in a human body and do that.
There's a experience in the superconscious. Will that affect and keep a score in the subconscious? Like, will you start to sort of move the needle?
You move the needle. Everybody, I mean, a master would sleep. Swami Kriyananda worked extraordinarily hard, but every so often we'd just sit down and watch a movie. He always old movies, always really clean, bright entertainment. It's a joke among us that Bambi was one of his favorite movies. We've all seen Bambi 100 times practically, but he still was just relaxing. But the whole spectrum came up, and the habits become much more elevated. The way of relaxing becomes much more elevated. Mm-hmm. And so it moves up, and you always have a choice. And you have self-mastery. So you can choose rather than just being compelled by habit. You don't, this is where Swami said, I feel it, but I'm calm. I can choose my response. Someone asked someone else who's comparable to me in experience, who was teaching in India, and they said, well, what kind of, siddhis is a word for what kind of spiritual power do you have? Like, can you change water into wine? Can you walk on water? What kind of power do you have? And at first he wanted to say none, but then he thought about it seriously. And then he said, I have the power to choose happiness. And sure, you can change water into wine, but you could just go buy the wine. But to choose happiness, that's a real power. And that's because subconsciousness would try to persuade him that he should be miserable because it didn't, but superconscious would say bliss is your true nature.
Have you got examples of like artists, geniuses, people that we think some of the greatest art comes from, that they're accessing the superconscious, or is it?
Invariably. If it's really great art, invariably. That's where all true greatness comes from. Great scientists, great artists, great mathematicians, great musicians. It all comes from the superconscious because that's where real originality comes from. Originality is not doing something that's never been done before. Originality is acting from your own point of origin. And the subconscious is not our point of origin. Subconscious is the accumulated experiences that we've had. Superconscious is the point of origin. It's where real originality comes from. And the other characteristic of the superconscious, it's where unity is experienced. If you think of the fingers of the hand, we live out on the tips. We think we're separate. If you live here, you realize that all come from the same source. Waves on the ocean. Superconscious, if you reverse it like that, when you move into the superconscious, you come into the level not merely of shared experience, but the perceivable unity of all consciousness and of all beings. When art comes from that level, what makes it great is because it presents to us a possibility, the possibility that we are longing for. We are not just longing for, a nice afternoon. We are longing for all freedom from fear, all freedom from suffering. And superconscious promises that. So when Handel received the Hallelujah chorus, he gave it to the world, every time you hear that piece of music, the hallelujahs, no matter how many times you've heard it, you just can't help but be moved because it was a gift from the superconscious. Just as simple as that. And it's beautiful musically, but what empowers it is how he received it and where it came from. And even little tiny people like us, I can't write the Hallelujah chorus, but I wrote a biography of Swami Kriyananda that is, for me, after I finished writing it, I published it, of course. I wanted it published, and, people read it. I think it's more for the future than the present, because people hardly know him now, but they'll want to know him. This is my belief. But I didn't need to publish it, because the experience of writing it just changed me, because it was original. I don't know if it's even good. It was the best I could do, but it was original. I was able to bring it out from my point of origin. I could say superconscious, and it was, but not in the sense that you're thinking. You know what I mean? It was just, I just was somewhere else. And it just made me so happy. And now when people like it or buy it, I think that's great. But it's incidental to the experience that I had. because it took me where I needed to go. And if it's helpful, which it is, I think it's wonderful, but that's extra.
As an artist, how did you deal with the fear of trying to work at that kind of level and put something out that was genuine and authentic and true to who you are, and also not conforming, well, this is how a book's supposed to be wrote, this is how you're supposed to do it, and the fear around putting something out there that maybe was from a higher level versus like textbook, this is what you're supposed to do?
Well, the main thing is I lived long enough to suffer enough to finally break all of those fears, because I had all of those fears and I was utterly paralyzed for many, many years. I mean, you know, where I'm living, how long I've been on this planet, you know, I think of a decade as a lot shorter to me than it probably is, you know, like the percentage of your life. How I got through it was I didn't give up. That's the only answer I can give you. I didn't quit. I just couldn't quit. I tried to quit a number of times. I mean, I had one experience where I was on holiday in Goa, but I called it Purgatory in Paradise. You know, it was just a horrible experience. Now I look back on it, but I can remember. I see myself crouched in a corner crying my eyes out, just in hopeless despair that I'd never get it right. I do not know how I ever got it right. I just know that I just kept at it.
How did you know it was right?
I could just feel it. It was unquestioned. There was just a certain point when the book told me what it was supposed to be. It told me what it was supposed to be. I've published 4 books. This was the culmination of that effort. All of them were the best that I could do. All of them had a touch of this in it. But Light Bearer was what the book is called, Light Bearer. It was God's grace, and there's no other word. I just knew what it was supposed to be, and I could tell the difference. Swami was guiding me. Swami was in the astral world by then. He'd left the body. But he just told me what I should and shouldn't say, almost explicitly. It's very funny. Superconscious is not as, let me see how to say this. It's perfectly natural. When you're actually in the flow of grace, it's perfectly natural. And so there isn't this great sense of separation from yourself. It's just perfectly natural. I'm not much of an athlete, but athletes talk about being in the zone. You know, it's just like, it's perfectly natural. You haven't become somebody else. You've actually just finally become yourself. And so creativity is like that. You just finally become yourself. And what you're doing, there's an astral pattern for it, just like the chakras are the pattern for our life. You wouldn't even conceive of doing it if the idea didn't already exist. And so all you have to do is just get in tune with that pattern. And yes, you have to overcome your fear. You have to stop thinking about what other people think. All of that. You do have to stop all of that. But you can. If you're sincere and you pray and you just keep trying and you don't give up. And, you know, practical things, but mostly then just like you just know. That's what I mean about it. It's just so relaxed. You just know.
Was there practical things that that helped you deal with that then? Like writing a page a day or sitting down at the desk? Was there anything?
I'm an extraordinarily unsystematic person in certain ways. But yeah, I'm just like people say, what's your daily routine? I don't know. What depends on the day, doesn't it? Which makes travel easier for me. But the end of it also is I had to, personally for this, I had to go into real seclusion. I went into super isolated seclusion I could only write that book in seclusion. I wrote it over a couple of years, but I did it in segments. And for a while, I stayed in a place where I didn't have internet or telephone or anything. Subsequently, I caught the flow, and I didn't have to be quite that isolated. I was 1,000 miles from home when I first began to get it. And it was just, I think the fact of moving myself into seclusion was just also an act of commitment that I'm going to do this. And I'm not necessarily, I don't know how to say it, but I'm not that kind of person. My housemate is a strong man, and I mean, he's always ready to pick up his gun or his sword or go out there and do battle, and I cower in the corner. But eventually I get myself onto the battlefield. And then when I do, you just persevere. I wish I could be more helpful.
You know, I love that. I think it's unique to each person. I think especially with art as well, like the way we create is completely different from artist to artist, and it comes through as completely differently as well. I guess you probably didn't have a fear of releasing it to the world if you felt it was right, but
I was totally fearless at that point because it was the book that was there in the ether for me to channel. And actually, it didn't make a whit of difference whether anybody liked it. First of all, it was the best I could do. I was completely certain that, and I stuck with it and I worked on it until I was sure it was the best I could do. As long as I stopped thinking about how long it took or anything. When will this be published? People would ask me. I say, when it's finished. When will it be finished? When it's finished. So I just committed to working on it until it was right, but not neurotically. Just knowing that it had a flow and that I just needed to stick with it till it was done. I felt it was good because if I had thought it was bad, I would have kept working on it. Whether anybody would care or not, it didn't matter because I had done my part. I had fulfilled my purpose. I'd written about this man that has transformed my life in the best way that I could, and I just laid it at the feet of the divine and said, this is my offering.
well, okay, because I think, yeah, the question about once it's releasing it out there is scary, and how would I do that? I think, yeah, you answer that by it being right. I think if you feel like it's right, then you wouldn't have those fears anyway.
It changed me in countless ways in terms of being worried about what other people thought. And the first time I actually read aloud some of the chapters to some of my friends, it was just like, that was earlier in the process, but it was like, I don't know what you would say, but it was really something to have other people suddenly in the room with me sharing this. And the fact that they liked it was very gratifying, but it wasn't I was afraid they wouldn't like it. It was so private at that point. And then all of a sudden it was going to be public. But I'm not, of course I care what people think, but partly the way I was raised and partly just the way I am. If I feel that I've done the right thing, or at least done my best, because oftentimes my best hasn't been very good, but there was nothing I could do about it. If people don't like it, well, they don't like it. What can I do? People don't like me for doing it. If my conscience is satisfied, or even if my conscience tells me that I was wrong, but I've accepted that I've made a mistake, and I've just accepted this as reality now, then what is the point? You can't live on other people's opinions. It's trying to make the world match what you want it to make. And yes, of course, it's a huge fear. It's a tremendous fear. But it's paralyzing.
So many artists are stuck there, I think. So many people who, I mean, I speak for myself completely with that. We used the word manifestation a couple of times in this conversation. What did manifestation come in as part of your creative process? Is that something that you would use within the creative process?
Well, yes, but it's not. It's an integrated aspect of my life. It's not like now I will manifest sort of thing. It's like over many years, many years, I've learned how to consistently apply energy. I've learned to have an instinct for the things that will succeed, not 100%, but I can sometimes tell when an idea is one to be pursued and not to be pursued. I have a kind of do or die spirit sometimes once I know that it's up to me to make this happen, and I'll just keep going until the guidance changes or the universe totally rejects what I want. It's the connectedness that gives it that feeling. And I have to say, in my own case, I live in very close relationship to the guidance of my teacher, Swami Kriyananda. And my life, because my life is pretty simple on many levels, I'm here to further Paramahansa Yogananda's mission, as Swami Kriyananda understood it and expressed it. And the simple words are, he guides me. But that guidance doesn't come like letters of gold or lo, my child, this is what you should do. It's just a feeling that this is what we're supposed to do. And in the context of helping to build up this community, which we're in now, it's just somehow we always knew what to do. And only slowly did I really appreciate, because I talked to Swamiji a lot, but in the course of 30 years, I think he gave us 2 specific directions. And the rest of it was just a kind of just knowing that this is what we should do. And only looking back did I see, wow, we were just in a flow of grace the whole time. And I began to know what that felt like. And so I can just kind of tell when it's supposed to happen or when it's not supposed to happen. And if it's supposed to happen, I'll do everything I can to make it happen, everything that's open to me, within the limits of my abilities. I'm kind of puny at times. I can collapse really easily and just go and read too many novels.
I want to attest to your sort of persistent by the boxes and boxes of notes and writings that you have in the house right now. I know.
That was really, talk about an old lady experience. When I put all that stuff into boxes, I mean, this is my life. You know, I don't have children and grandchildren, and I don't pick up the baby socks that my little one wore because I never had babies or anything. It's my life in front of me, and wow.
How many boxes of notes are there?
16. It is a lot. There's a little duplication in there, but not enough. And I've already written a big, thick book, but so I don't know what I'm going to do now. I have to, some of that is universally shared, but a great deal of it is I had a notebook and a pencil or a pen for over 40 years. I just wrote down everything that was significant to me. And a great deal of it either will be of interest to people who are already involved and will be interest over the years to come as all of this rises more to the surface than it is now. Right now, we're still a little lunatic fringe over here. I've always been proud to be part of the lunatic fringe. In California, when we first came here 35 years ago or whenever it was, we were the only game in town in terms of meditation. I mean, it was just the only one, or yoga. We were the only ones doing it. Now it's, you know, they have the classes at the bank. But in California, not everybody meditates, but those who don't feel guilty. So I think we've gone a long distance, and that's where we are now.
I've interviewed maybe 100, 150 people, maybe more, and all of them are striving for what perception of success is, or some kind of spiritual journey, or they had some intention and they're either achieving it or achieved it. And I've come across a small handful of people who have really kind of taken me aback by, they set out with the intention of becoming rich, wealthy, successful, all your sort of typical things, had a realization that this is not what it's about, and I'm on the wrong path, and I'm going to let go of this and start pursuing the real thing that I can see. And it was always around either helping other people or pursuing a passion that I would have a positive impact on the world. And they started pursuing that and working towards that and doing it with the right intentions. But then these things that they wanted so badly, money, the success, all that kind of stuff, it did come for them. And it eventually, pursuing the right thing, they gained it. But they also said it didn't matter. And they had true intention of, I still don't really care about it, but it did come eventually. And those things is there something to be said for letting go of the desire for the materialistic and the need for it and the real want for it, that when you start to let go of it, it can come in, or
It's not quite as simple as that, unfortunately.
I didn't think it was going to be.
That sounds a little teeny tiny bit simplistic. I'll let go of it and then I'll have it. Like, I don't know, God is not fooled. Let's just put it that way. And physics is not fooled. You can mouth all the proper words you want, but you're still vibrating where you're vibrating. However, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. I mean, it's right there in the Bible, which is if you align yourself with the highest that you can understand, and if you sincerely and deeply give yourself to that, then you are cooperating with divine law. Now, that doesn't mean you'll automatically get rich by any means, but you have a better chance of acquiring abundance in one form or another if you are aligned. And if you know you're not aligned, if you are deliberately doing something that you know is not expansive, helpful, righteous, or even honorable, how is that going to work out for you? Actions have consequences. And maybe you'll get away with it in this lifetime, maybe not. But it's not true to say to people, just follow your passion and you'll get rich doing it. You have to be practical in your idealism. It was one of Swami Kriyananda's principles. You have to be practical in your idealism. But oftentimes, if you are aligned, you're putting out positive magnetic energy, and money is just energy. The universe responds, and you will be taken care of. It's just something that you have to think about. But let me think for just a second here. Let me get the thought right. You have to also, you have to be as authentic and as integrated as you can possibly be. You can't game the system. You have to be really sincere in it. And what you're describing also is that people advance. First, they'll only put out energy for themselves, but then they realize that it's more joyful to give out energy for a serviceful purpose, but then you're often cooperating with higher laws. And so often, yes, you're right. If you put out energy for a higher purpose, you will be taken care of. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll become rich. I mean, I and all of my peers who basically came into the Ananda world when we were in our 20s, helped start these communities, and all of us had enormous earning potential if we'd wanted it. I mean, speaking personally, I could have done anything. I had the opportunity and the potential. And so at different times in my life, I've had to, ask this question to myself. The reason I don't have money is because I chose to serve a higher cause than just making myself rich. I remember saying to one of my friends once, if we were just working for ourselves, we'd be so rich by now because we work hard and we work smart. Too bad. But it's more like, been there, done that. Know that it can be done, and I don't want to waste another lifetime. But I also have to say, if at the end of my life I end up with nothing and I'm living homeless under a bridge, I've given my life to God, and if that's what He gives back to me, that's what He gives back to me. And that's not I haven't run that tape superficially.
When you say a saying that I hear all the time, you might get away with it in this lifetime. After we've had a conversation around reincarnation, like that it's quite ominous in some ways. Like, okay, well, we have to think about what we do. Like obviously that.
But you really have to think about what you...
Yeah, you really do, yeah.
You really have to think about it, because just because you get away with it didn't mean you got away with it. It just means that you had enough energy going this way to block it from reaching you, but right now. But if it's a consequence, it will come to you. I mean, why are some people so, quote, lucky? There was this gentleman in our community who just had a Midas touch with business. He was actually he was in the fitness industry, and he just always, he basically was one of the people who helped change the fitness industry to a large extent. He created the first luxury fitness clubs in this area. And he was always just ahead of the movement, and he was just way out there. And Swami remarked about him, he said, you look at him and you think he's lucky. They don't see all the incarnations that he worked and all the good karma that he put in by being generous with his wealth that caused the wealth to come to him easily this time.
One of the most practical steps I think that we spoke about is the small steps and taking those small steps, which I think is lovely for so many people, because we are seeing it as this huge, grand idea of how to change our lives, but it is just in the small.
One of the ways we manage to avoid having to actually change our lives is by doing wildly crazy things that don't work, and then we don't really have to do the hard work.
Procrastination through something grand, yeah, I think I've guilty of that myself.
Well, it's just, it's romantic. We're sort of romantic. Just the grand gesture is so much more attractive than the actual arduous, boring, day-to-day effort required.
I think also you can be forgiven for not achieving or not following through with the big thing because it was so difficult, but making the bed in the morning, it's
No, that's exactly right. Look at your room. Whenever I'm having a bad period, my room is inevitably a mess. And I have to start by just cleaning it up again. And it's just straightening it up and then just get it in order. And then, you move it and you just do it over and over again.
That's a really good point to end on. Is we were speaking about awareness, and my concern is always that people have to reach rock bottom to find awareness, which I think scares me for a lot of people, because it's just not a nice place to be. But I think that's a really nice little mark point, is just to look around you and look at your environment, and are you frequently in a mess? Then that might be a good mark point. But have a little think.
Yeah, exactly. What am I avoiding? What am I waiting to be rescued from? Yeah, I don't have to face it because I'm going to be rescued. And my ideal partner is going to come. My $1 million is going to change it. Or I'll just, interestingly, very interestingly, this man who used to do, Stephen Levine, who did wonderful work with death and dying. He was a pioneer decades ago. And he would have these retreats for people who had terminal illnesses. And they would first make a list of everything. Let me just get it correct. Everything that they would miss if they died earlier than they expected. And everybody would cry, and walking my daughter down the aisle, having grandkids, finishing college, depending how young they were, like that. Then you make a list of everything that you wouldn't have to face because you were dying. And everybody thought what they had to work on was that they were going to miss, but the actual thing they had to work on is, what am I being rescued from by dying early? Because that's really, naturally, you want to walk your daughter down the aisle and you want to see your children grow up. That's so natural. You can't tell yourself that I shouldn't feel that. You have to grieve it. You have to mourn it. You have to face it. You have to accept the sorrow. But what's really holding you back is, what do you think you're going to get to avoid? And this is where reincarnation comes in, and this is why it's such a powerful teaching. You're going to have to face it now. Because if you think you're going to postpone it to the future, it's going to be now when it comes. And it's all, that's where you're trapped.